The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
We're reading today from the American Revolution of 1800 by Dan Sisson. He wrote the book 40 years ago. Recently, I went through, Dan and I actually went through, I wrote a foreword and an afterword to it and did some substantial editing on the book. And it's something you need to read. This is from the introduction, which I wrote. It is rare when a book about our early republic is relevant 40 years after it was originally published. It is rarer still when that book provides insight into national problems we refuse to solve 2 centuries later. You are therefore holding in your hands or reading on your pad or computer one of the most important books you will ever encounter. Here's why. Unlike other histories of this era, this book is written from a revolutionary perspective, much like Jefferson's generation viewed the world. The American Revolution of 1800 was not just about an election. It was about the life and death struggle for power between democratic-republican principles and oligarchic plutocratic values based on corruption. In short, this book, by implication, is about the identical crisis America faces today. The author's unique analysis is based on the idea of faction controlling party and how both undermine constitutional government. In an age where modern parties and the factions that control them have paralyzed our government, this book validates the politics of the founders. In still another contribution, the book demonstrates how preserving revolutionary ideas within our culture depends on understanding the classical tradition. The ability to recognize a demagogue is rooted deeply in the role Caesar played in destroying the Republic of ancient Rome. That fear of a Caesar inspired Jefferson and others to organize citizens against the Federalists, thereby completely contradicting the political rules of their time. This book, above all, presents a profoundly positive view of Jefferson and his creativity in the midst of crisis. It celebrates his gift 24 years after he wrote the Declaration of Independence and proves he never abandoned his principles or his revolutionary vision for America's future. Ironically, it's become a cliche in political and economic circles that while we love Thomas Jefferson, we live in a country largely run by Alexander Hamilton's policies and John Adams's politics. This may have been more true of the roughly 200 years before the contemporary free trade era, beginning in the 1970s under Richard Nixon and exploding in the mid-1990s when Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. Alexander Hamilton must be rolling over in his grave. Nevertheless, we have become a mercantilist nation dominated by banks and big industries as Hamilton envisioned. It is true that there were huge differences between Hamilton and Jefferson, particularly in their visions for the future of America and its economy. And those divisions tend to dominate interpretations of our political discussion when we reference the era of our first few presidents. But a much larger and more dramatic battle of worldviews played out in the late 1790s between President John Adams and Vice President Thomas Jefferson, leading directly to what is arguably the most transformational presidential election in the history of the United States, the election of 1800. In other books and places, both Dan Sisson and I have written at some length about the differences between these two men and their respective visions of America. Adams relished throwing newspapers editors in prison and demanded that when he and his wife visited a town, the local militia come out to fire their cannons in salute of him and shout, "God save President Adams." Jefferson was so horrified by Adams's Alien and Sedition Acts that he left town the day they were signed into law, and as president often wore simple homespun garments. He was known to answer the front door of the White House in his bathrobe, and more than one visitor mistook him for a servant. As president, Jefferson literally acted out his egalitarian visions of America. In my book, The Crash of 2016, The Plot to Destroy America and What We Can Do to Stop It, I describe Jefferson's concern over aristocracy in American politics. On October 28, 1813, in a letter to his old rival John Adams, Jefferson commented on his distrust of America's growing wealthy elite, naming in particular the Senate, which was not then democratically elected by the people. Referring to the, quote, cabal in the Senate of the United States, end quote, Jefferson wrote, "You, John Adams, think it best to put the pseudo-aristoi into a separate chamber of legislation, the Senate, where they may be hindered from doing their mischief by their coordinate branches, and where also they may be a protection to wealth against the agrarian and plundering enterprises of the majority of the people." Then Jefferson countered in the letter, writing, "I do not believe them, the Senate, necessary to protect the wealthy, because enough of them will find their way into every branch of the legislation to protect themselves." Instead, Jefferson wrote, "I think the best remedy is exactly that provided by all our constitutions, to leave to the citizens the free election. In general, they will elect the really good and wise. In some instances, wealth may corrupt and birth blind them, but not in sufficient degree to endanger society." And in a final warning about the largely Federalist cabal in the Senate, and these would be the conservatives of their time, Jefferson wrote, quote, "The artificial aristocracy is a mischievous ingredient in government, and provision should be made to prevent its ascendancy. I think that to give them power in order to prevent them from doing mischief is arming them for it, and increasing instead of remedying the evil." In a 1786 letter to George Washington, Jefferson gave his most explicit warning about this threat of a military allied with the plutocracy within, and advocated for unwavering vigilance against it. Quote, "Though the day may be at some distance, beyond the reach of our lives perhaps, yet it will certainly come, when a single fiber left of this institution will produce an hereditary aristocracy which will change the form of our governments from the best to the worst in the world."
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, there's for the last day of the year, functionally, I mean, it's New Year's Eve is what, Sunday night? Yeah, Sunday night. And Monday is New Year's Day. We're going to take Monday off. We've got a nice best of planned for you. And we'll be back on Tuesday. But it's what a bizarre year. I mean, this was the first year that Donald Trump was president. What a bizarre year. But it's not just the politics that are bizarre. I mean, the economics, the whole zeitgeist of our culture. It's almost like the Trump presidency has brought into stark relief, into clear view, all of the various dysfunctions in our economy and our body politic that have been brought about by, I would argue, basically the Powell Memo of 1971, when Lewis Powell said to conservatives and business people, we have to start taking over the institutions of America. We have to take over the universities. We have to take over the government. We have to take over the courts. We have to take, as business people, we have to get politically involved. We have to take, we have to take over the public schools. We have to, we got to do everything, right? And they did. And here we are. And now basically everything has been financialized. Everything has been turned into a potential revenue source. For example, your kid has a new app on their phone, right? Let's say that the app is Teeth Fixed or Zap Balloons. These are, according to the New York Times, programs for little kids. Well, they contain a piece of software. The piece in the New York Times today is by Sapnam Maheshwari, and it's titled "That game on your phone may be tracking what you're watching on TV." Yes. At first glance, the gaming apps with names like Pool 3D, Beer Pong Trick Shot, and Real Bowling Strike 10-Pin seem innocuous. One called HoneyQuest features Jumbo, an animated bear. Yet these apps, once downloaded into a smartphone, had the ability to keep tabs on the viewing habits of their users. The way it works is they turn on the microphone on your phone, and they just continuously listen. And they can hear what you're watching on TV. The article notes the apps use software from Alfonso, a startup that collects TV viewing data for advertisers that can be used to target ads more precisely. More than 250 games that use this software are available in the Google Play Store. Some are also available in Apple's App Store. The software can detect sounds even when the phone is in a pocket if the apps are running in the background, which really demonstrates this idea that if you're not paying for something, you are probably the product that's being sold. Which is really a kind of sad commentary. I mean, it used to be, the good old days. It used to be that people would put information on the internet because they wanted other people to know about it, or people would develop games because, hey, it was fun and it was cool, that maybe we could make a little money here, crowdsourcing them or something. Now it's completely gone to spyware, essentially. What happened to the Fourth Amendment? What happened to our notions of privacy? We're putting Google speakers and Amazon speakers in our homes that constantly monitor everything that's going on, in our homes. You've got police departments now and state attorneys general who are looking at how to use or change the laws so that if somebody in your home has been accused of committing a crime in the last year, they can go back to whichever company you have the smart speaker from and ask them for, since everything you say goes up into the cloud, goes onto the servers of these giant corporations, ask them for everything that was said in your house during the month of November, for example. I mean, really? That, now there's to be fair, some of these manufacturers are suggesting that they don't actually gather all that information, that their smart speakers wait for the magic word to turn them on, and then they gather the information. But, law enforcement has been saying something somewhat different, or at least the news. So what's happened? Our Fourth Amendment rights, that's your right to privacy. The Fourth Amendment says you be secure in your person and papers and home against unreasonable search and seizure. Obviously, the whole point of the Fourth Amendment is to protect us from government. It provides you the Fourth Amendment provides you with no protection whatsoever from Google, for example. But still, the Fourth Amendment reflected, maybe up until the last 15 years or so, reflected this idea that anonymity is a good thing, privacy is a good thing. Without anonymity, there never would have been an American Revolution. Without privacy, a lot of actually great things, arguably a lot of terrible things too. I mean, the anti-privacy rant or rap is always, hey, we got to stop the terrorists. But with privacy, lots of good things have happened as well, and we no longer seem to value that. And I find that just extraordinary. That you don't and I don't even know. I mean, every now and then you find a really great app. Oh, even if you pay for it, you may not know whether or not it's being used to spy on you. This is, by the way, not a new technology. This is been around for a long time. They use it for collecting ratings information on radio shows. People are designated to wear these little contraptions that listen to what they're listening to so that they can find out which shows they're watching, stuff like that. So, I mean, this has been around for a while, but in the past, you actually had to apply to be a person who would, or that maybe they solicited you, I'm not sure, but whatever, to be a person who would actually carry a device that's going to listen to everything you listen to. That's a completely different thing than having your phone be the device and you don't know it. So what do we do about that? Or do we simply say, okay, that's it. Privacy is dead. Amazon knows everything. And what they don't know, Google knows. And by the way, they're totally entitled to sell all their information to each other. But it even goes, in some ways a step beyond that. And I don't know if it was Pat Sweeney or if it was Sue who just posted in our chat room, the age of access, the new culture of hyper-capitalism. I guess that's what I'm talking about here. Is this new culture, everything seems designed to make a buck. And, there are times in life when not making a buck seems like a fairly important thing. There's, having good public services. In other countries, like in most European countries, most of the developed countries in the world, for example, you know, things like the internet, electricity, and whatnot, they're considered utilities. They're considered virtually a right, you know, something that should be better for all of us. But instead what happens is here in the United States anyway, post-Reagan, is that anything that can be privatized is being privatized. Our private prisons, for example, private prisons were fading, right, before the election of Donald Trump, because President Obama had explicitly said, you know, private prisons are not a public good. I mean, he didn't literally say that in those words, but words to that effect, and put us on a course to phase out at least many of our private prisons in the United States. And in fact, this is from The Guardian, the piece by Jamalise Lartley. 16 months ago, the outlook for private prisons seemed bleak. That was when the Obama Department of Justice announced it was phasing out their use. Well, now this tax bill, the Trump tax bill, prison firms that restructure as real estate investment trusts see substantial tax cuts. Individual investors in U.S. private prisons are poised to collect their most lucrative earnings ever, thanks to changes in the tax code signed by Donald Trump. Brilliant.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's a 25% reduction in income taxes for private prison corporations. Really? This is what we want to be encouraging? And welcome back. Let's see here. Randall, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Oceanside, California. Hey, Randall, what's on your mind today?
Good to hear from you, Tom. I hope you had a good Christmas and New Year's. And I'd like to ask you a question because I value your opinion, and it's simply this. Why isn't President Trump considered an anarchist?
I think that there's a substantial difference between anarchy and oligarchy. You know, anarchy broadly has two meanings in our popular discourse. One is just, you know, crazy stuff going on, you know, no rhyme or reason, you know, that sort of thing. That's the kind of pop culture definition of anarchy. But then the political definition of anarchy is a political system that is far more horizontal and less vertical. And what Trump has been doing is creating a far more vertical political system. I mean, he even has federal agencies asserting that states can't do things like protect their own air and water. So it seems to me that they're completely the opposite. What am I missing, Randall?
Well, I'm thinking that, you know, basically management through chaos is what I considered anarchy, and that seems to be his style. I'm not arguing the fact that he's an oligarch.
Yeah. Or is advancing oligarchy as government policy. I mean, that's my concern. But yes, he himself is an oligarch too, and we should. And I'm surprised our media doesn't call him that. I mean, if a billionaire was running pretty much any other country, our media, particularly a country like Russia or China, our media would refer to them as an oligarch, and we don't for the American president who is a billionaire. But you know, yeah, he's governing. Governing by surprise, which is that phrase from Milton Mayer's book, They Thought They Were Free, where the German college professor talking about the 1930s in Germany, he said, we grew accustomed to being governed by surprise. And that producing uncertainty, and then the uncertainty producing a reluctance on the part of people to speak out and engage in mass protests and those kind of things. If that all makes sense, you know, that's, you know, I see that happening, Randall. I don't see him as an anarchist, but
okay,
yeah,
you know, fair enough. I just wanted to hear your opinions and your thoughts on the matter. I have mine, obviously, and
yeah.
I kind of seem to think that his management style is an anarchist.
Yeah, well, you know, you're hewing to that kind of more popular definition of the word of just, you know, not having a coherent thread through it. Perhaps. It seems to me that the coherent thread that runs through Trump's management style, whether it's as a business manager or as a governmental manager, is egoism, is narcissism. I mean, you know, Trump does things in order to punish his enemies, reward his friends, particularly his friends who suck up to him loudly and publicly, and publish enemies who speak poorly of him. You know, Bob Corker and Jeff Flake now are both, you know, not even going to run for re-election because they've angered the Donald. That again is not random. That there's a very specific through line to all of that. That and things like, you know, he's making money off his hotel and whatnot. But I get what you're saying, Randall. I think what we're discussing here is semantics. But good point. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity,
resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you
24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. So, well, there's an awful lot in the news, and I want to get into a number of other things here, if I may, just to set up possible conversations, and then after the break at the bottom of the hour, I'll start picking up your calls. I generally am not a fan of year in a review shows. It seems to me like most of them are just ways to fill time. I'm not going to do that. But if there's anything about the year in review that you'd like to bring up and discuss, you know, I have no problem with that. So just FYI. Back in 1889, there was a Native American by the name of Wovoka. He was a Paiute mystic. And in 1889, he had a vision where he said if all the tribes of North America, the Native American tribes, if all the tribes began, or if a certain threshold of the tribes began participating in the ghost dance, which was an ancient ceremony, if they began participating in the ghost dance, it would lead to, through spiritual means, it would lead to the revival of Native American communities and the white man leaving the Native Americans alone. So that was 1889. The next year, on December 29th, today, in 1890, Chief Spotted Elk, also known as Bigfoot, led a band of 350 Minneconjou Sioux into a camp on the banks of Wounded Knee Creek. I'm reading this from Indian Country Today, by the way. Patty Jo King's piece, The Truth About the Wounded Knee Massacre, was deadly force used. Why was deadly force used at Wounded Knee? And what was going on was that these Indians were there to perform a ghost dance. But, you know, we had said you can't do that. And the U.S. troops had surrounded them, and they were going to arrest Spotted Elk, or Bigfoot. And General Nelson Miles and Major Samuel Whiteside of the 7th Cavalry decided to stop the ghost dance. Can't have a ghost dance. So they intercepted these guys on the 28th of December, yesterday, leading to the edge of the creek, and from a hill above, and then the 29th, today, reading from this piece from Indian Country Today, From a hill above, a Hotchkiss machine gun raked the teepees. Gunsmoke filled the air, and men, women, and children ran for a ravine near the camp, only to be cut down in crossfire. More than 200 Lakota lay dead or dying in the aftermath, as well as at least 20 soldiers. For 19th century Americans, the Wounded Knee Massacre represented the end of Indian resistance and the conquest of the West. For the Indians, it represented the utter disregard of the U.S. toward its treaty responsibilities, and it represented the duplicity and cruelty of the U.S. toward Native people. That was on this day in 1890. The yield curve. I teased this twice yesterday, and I never got to it. My apologies. This is from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, serving the 2nd District and the nation. And the piece, it's at newyorkfed.org/research/capital_markets/ycfaq.html. Anyhow, it's called the yield curve as a leading indicator. It's on the website of the New York Fed. And what the yield curve is the, expressed as a ratio, it's the relationship between the return, the yield, being paid on short-term bonds, on 3-month bonds, on 6-month bonds, or maybe even in some cases 1-year bonds, and long-term bonds, typically 10-year or 20-year Treasury bonds. Now, generally speaking, if you're tying your money up for 10 or 20 years in a long-term bond, the government would have to offer you a higher rate of return in order to tie up your money. So typically the yield on long-term bonds is higher. Say it's like 2.5% on a 10-year bond, whereas on a 5-year bond it's only, or on a 1-year bond it's only 1% or 1.5%, something like that. So typically there's a difference between these short-term yields and these long-term yields that represents the cost of tying up your money in a long-term bond. It just makes sense, right? It's just a very logical thing. But every now and then, the yield, that is the interest that's paid, the yield, the return that you get, on short-term bonds becomes actually higher than long-term bonds, or approaches it. They're within 1/4 of a point right now. In fact, I think they're within 150 basis points, which is 0.15 of a point, right? 1,000 basis points, you know. Anyway, when that yield curve reverses or flattens, when those numbers come close together, or when the short-term bond yields even exceeds the long-term bond yields, that is almost all, with one exception in my lifetime, that has always meant that within the next year you're going to see a recession. The yield curve has not completely flattened, but it's in the neighborhood of where it was around 2000. And of course, there was a substantial stock market bubble that popped then. We got a bunch of other stuff to talk about, a number of things I want to get into. There's Republican Jesus. There is, does punishment actually work? Donald, and then I've got a bunch of Trump news. We'll put that off until later.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Well, later in the show. Stick around. We'll be back with your calls after this.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Crisis Without End. This is a collection of essays about nuclear power compiled by Helen Caldicott and edited by Helen Caldicott. I'm reading from the introduction which she wrote. She is the world-famous Australian pediatrician, physician who has been speaking out about nuclear power and whatnot for years and years. On March 11, 2011, an earthquake measuring 9 on the Richter scale struck off the east coast of Japan. Within days, the ensuing tsunami had induced the meltdown of 3 of the 6 nuclear reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. During the earthquake, the external power supply was lost to the reactor complex. The pumps that circulate up to 1 million gallons of water per minute to cool each reactor core ceased to function. Emergency diesel generators situated below the plants kicked in, but these were soon swamped by the tsunami.
Without cooling, the radioactive cores in units 1, 2, and 3 began to melt within hours. Over the next few days, all 3 cores, each weighing up to 100 tons, melted their way through 6 inches of steel at the bottom of their reactor vessels and oozed their way onto the concrete floor of the containment buildings, a fact that the Japanese government and Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, the power plant operator, continued to deny for months after the disaster. At the same time, the zirconium cladding covering thousands of uranium fuel rods reacted with water to create hydrogen, which initiated hydrogen explosions in units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Massive quantities of radiation escaped into the air and water, 3 times more noble gases, argon, xenon, and krypton, than at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant accident in 1986, and huge amounts of other volatile and non-volatile radioactive elements, including cesium, tritium, iodine, strontium, silver, plutonium, americium, and rubidium. Fukushima is now described as the greatest industrial accident in history. The Japanese government considered plans to evacuate 35 million people from Tokyo as other reactors, including 4 at Fukushima Daini, several miles along the coast from Fukushima Daiichi, were also at risk. Meanwhile, thousands of people fled the area around the smoldering reactors, but they were not notified when the radioactive plumes were traveling, despite the fact that there was a system in place to track the plumes. As a result, people fled directly into regions with the highest radiation concentrations, where they were exposed to high levels of whole-body external gamma radiation, inhaling radioactive air, and swallowing radioactive elements. Administering inert potassium iodide to the exposed people would have blocked the uptake of radioactive iodine in the thyroid glands. Unfortunately, it was not supplied except in the town of Miharu, where there was a conscientious mayor. Prophylactic iodine was, however, distributed to the staff of Fukushima Medical University in the days following the accident, after extremely high levels of radioactive iodine, 1.9 million becquerels per kilogram, were discovered in leafy vegetables near the university. Iodine contamination was already widespread in leafy vegetables and milk, while other isotopic contamination from substances such as cesium was widespread in vegetables, fruit, meat, milk, rice, and tea in many areas of Japan. Fukushima disaster is not over and will not end for many millennia. The radioactive fallout, which has covered vast swaths of Japan, will remain toxic for hundreds of thousands of years. It cannot simply be cleaned up, and it will continue to contaminate food, humans, and animals. It is unlikely that the 3 Fukushima Daiichi reactors that experienced total meltdowns will ever be deassembled or decommissioned. TEPCO claims such a massive undertaking will take them at least 30 to 40 years. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, predicts that it will be more than 40 years before any progress can be made because of the dangerous levels of radioactivity at the damaged reactors. This accident is identical to the Chernobyl catastrophe in its medical implications. The Fukushima meltdowns will induce an epidemic of cancer as people ingest radioactive elements. The single meltdown and explosion at Chernobyl contaminated 40% of the European landmass. Already, according to a 2009 report published by the New York Academy of Sciences, over 1 million people have perished as a result directly of that catastrophe. Large parts of Europe will remain radioactive for hundreds of years, as will now be the case in Japan. In assessing the impact of the Fukushima disaster on Japan and on the planet, and in assessing the safety of nuclear power overall, it is imperative to understand and evaluate the biological and medical consequences of exposure to the kinds of radioactive elements that were released during an accident at a nuclear power plant. Fact 1, no dose of radiation is safe. Each dose received by the body is cumulative and adds to the risk of developing malignancy or genetic disease. Fact 2, children are 10 to 20 times more vulnerable to the carcinogenic effects of radiation than adults. Females tend to be more sensitive than males, while fetuses and immunocompromised patients are also extremely sensitive. Fact 3, high doses of radiation received from a nuclear meltdown or from weapons explosions can cause acute radiation sickness, including hair loss, severe nausea, diarrhea, and bleeding. Reports of these illnesses, particularly among children, appeared within the first few months after the Fukushima accident. And then it goes on, the types of ionizing radiation. Crisis Without End by Helen Keller.
you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you and picking up your calls on this last day of the year. Mike in Los Angeles, listening on KPFK. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Happy holidays. I'm still waiting for the 5 gold rings.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to do something I thought I'd never do, and that is defend a Bush. This is specifically about Billy Bush and the Hollywood Access tapes in which Trump basically tells us who he actually is.
Right.
Now, if Billy Bush had gotten all super moral and up on his hind feet and said, oh, this is horrible, I'm not going to let you tell me about this, we would not have the evidence in sound recording, which can be identified very clearly by voice print as Donald Trump. But it basically tells us who this person is, someone with virtually no self-esteem.
This person being Trump, you're talking about?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
For him, sex is a matter of dominance. It's a matter of power or money being used to bend someone to your will, or in the case of the victims, people who are being sexually assaulted. If this individual came from Brooklyn rather than Trump Tower, he'd be a registered sex offender by now.
Right.
So I think this will be of considerable interest in the future. And I also wanted to make the point that in all the locker rooms I've been in, I've never heard any guy bragging about raping anybody.
Neither do I.
And this is
or anything even close to it. I've literally never heard that in my life.
Yeah, normal social animals, human or otherwise, do not behave like that to get sex.
Yeah.
And this guy is not normal.
No,
He's pathological.
Absolutely right. And yesterday, and I won't repeat the whole thing, but yesterday I said that I thought Billy Bush, in some ways got a bad rap because he was not the alpha dog in that situation. He was in a situation where you had a very, very wealthy, one of the wealthiest men in the world, one of the most powerful men in the world, sitting right next to him, and he was in show business, which is a very, very fragile business. You screw up in any consequential way, and boom, your entire career can be destroyed. And certainly angering NBC's biggest star, Donald Trump, would be a great way to ruin your career in show business. And so here's Billy Bush, encountering this boorish behavior from Trump, and he's laughing. And I just took that as nervous laughter. I have, and I mentioned yesterday, I've been more outspoken probably in the last decade or so, particularly since I've been doing political talk radio. But certainly there were times in my life, particularly when I was younger and didn't feel that I had power, where people around me have made racist comments, misogynistic comments, anti-Semitic comments, and I have nervously laughed, or I've ignored them, or I've just kind of moved on in the conversation. I don't do that anymore, or certainly don't do it as much. I don't think I do it at all. And I suspect that as a culture, we're not putting up with that anymore to a large extent. And the Me Too movement has a big role to play in that. But I personally think that Billy Bush got the short end of a stick that really should have been one upon which Donald Trump was, well, I don't want to go any farther with that metaphor. But anyhow, Mike, thanks for the call. Thanks for listening to KPFK. Cliff in Canyon Country, California. Hey, Cliff, what's on your mind?
Season's greetings, Tom.
Back at you, Cliff. What's up?
Hey, I just read an article about Stephen Hawking's predictions. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw a roundup piece a couple of days ago about all of his various predictions, his warnings about artificial intelligence, his saying that we only have 500 years left as a species on the planet.
Or
was it 100
the one
years?
that I just read, I guess in 2016 he had said something about we had 1,000 years left, but his most recent one said that he thinks we have about 100 years left on Earth, and that we need to find somewhere else to, populate our species, like another planet or a spacecraft or something.
Yeah, Hawking has become a Malthusian. it's interesting.
Yeah, but and the part about artificial intelligence was pretty interesting. Thinking that they're going to ultimately completely perform a new form of life that will outperform and eventually replace humans.
It is not inconceivable. I mean, it's been grist for the mill of many science fiction stories over the years.
Yeah, I'm wondering what kind of time frame we're looking at here.
Oh, the U.S. military is developing killer robots right now. The Trump administration just did away with restrictions on the use. Now, this doesn't have to do with artificial intelligence, but it has to do with, you know, this Stephen Hawking's predictions. One of the things that Hawking was concerned about, and he talked about how the National Health Service in the UK was keeping him alive and how much he loved the National Health Service, but also talked about how important it is to have, for everybody in the world, to have access to health care in order to deal with things like pandemics and epidemics. At the same time that he's talking about, hey, we need to have better health care and a better, more resilient public health system, the Trump administration, there were rules put into place by the Obama administration that said that if you are working on weaponizing bacteria, virus, or phages, basically any microorganisms, if you're trying to make, you know, flu or smallpox or whatever, if you're trying to make it more potent or more transmissible, if you're looking at any way of weaponizing that, then you have to operate under insanely rigid rules where you've got enormous amounts of government oversight, because this is something that really should only be happening in the military sphere, and even there it probably shouldn't be happening. Trump rolled back those rules in the last week or so. So, you know, which gives even more currency to Stephen Hawking's predictions. So anyhow, Cliff, thanks for the call. It is an interesting time. Fred in Malta, Illinois. Hey, Fred, it says here you're running for a county board?
Yes, I'm running for not only for precinct committeeman, but also for the county board. And one of the things to do that, you have to go out and get signatures.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I did find was when I was out getting signatures is I wouldn't tell them which party I was running on.
Uh-huh.
But the Republican people would instantly tell me that they were Republican. They didn't want anything to do with me. Just leave. Go away.
How did they know that you weren't a Republican?
I wouldn't say. I just tell them I'm running for county board.
I see. Okay.
And like I say, the majority of the Democrats were very conversational. They wanted to know what my thoughts on things were, and et cetera. But like I say, the majority of the Republicans was, and I had quite a few of them slam the door in my face. Just, you know, I'd walk up and tell them that I'm running for the county board, and they say, I'm a Republican, I want nothing to do with it, and slam the door.
Are you a, I hesitate to use this phrase, but I don't know how else to say it. Are you a normal-looking, middle-class white guy?
Yes, I am. I'm in my upper 70s. I still have a job.
Yeah.
Huh. And very normal looking. The fact that if you passed me on the street, you wouldn't even take a.
So there wasn't, you know, long hair or a beard that might cause Republicans to think, oh my God, he's an old hippie. You know, it just the Republicans just got upset because you wouldn't say you were a Republican. This is fascinating.
No, I ex-military, so I always keep my hair rather short.
Uh-huh.
And you know, very common looking. Try to use good, clean language.
Huh. Amazing. Well, you know, the interesting thing, I mean, George Lakoff talks about this a lot, how Democrats view the world, or progressives generally, liberals, view society and economies and government as in the nurturing family context, that we're all here for each other. And therefore, collaboration and cooperation is an important thing. And I'm going to riff about this a little more in the next hour when I talk about punishment versus cooperation. And Republicans and conservatives, on the other hand, tend to, using Lakoff's model again, tend to view life, society, the economy, and government through the lens of authoritarian parent. Strict parent is how Lakoff is the phrase Lakoff uses. They're authoritarian followers who want an authoritarian leader. And so as authoritarians, they would be much more suspicious. They're more easily manipulated by fear and grievance. And fear and grievance are the principal currencies of Fox News and right-wing hate radio. So I guess it makes sense that they would be more inclined to slam the door in your face than Democrats who think that, hey, it's, you know, we're all here together in this nurturing family, even those we disagree with. Might that be the explanation, Fred?
I think so, yes. You know, I really kind of feel sorry for them because they live in such a narrow world, and they don't see anything with. There's no rose blossoms. It's everything is grim and sad. It's hard to get along with.
Yeah, yeah, remarkable.
You really have to have sympathy for them because, like I say, they do not see the better side of life.
Right. Fred, I have a little less than a minute before we hit a hard break. I'm curious, for all of our listeners who might think, you said you're both running for county board and for precinct committee person, in 30 seconds or thereabouts. Can you tell us, what was that experience like, and what did you have to do to get there?
Well, in the first year of George W., I went down to the Democratic board and told them I would like to run. And the young lady told me, she said, well, we've never run in that area. We've never won anything, so we won't even be there to support you.
Whoa.
And then I seen, then I was watching the before the election, how Trump was coming on and everything like that. And I thought, I've got to get out there and do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to them, and this time they were very supportive. They helped me out and gave me all the forms, told me how to go about it. And
oh, that's great.
That's where I'm at.
That's great. What I'm seeing all over the country is that the Democratic Party is now committed to challenging every race. And so if you're thinking of, and I say this to everybody else who's listening right now, Fred, if you're thinking of running for political office or even just participating in the Democratic Party, there is no better time than right now. Fred, good on you. You are a hero for the day. Thank you so much for the call, and thanks for sharing your story with all of us. And thanks for listening. Yeah, and thanks for listening to 92.5 FM in Chicago. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And Fred, call back and tell Arthur if you've got a website or something, if you'd like people to know about it. I'll mention it on the air. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Mark, watching Free Speech TV in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
How you doing? I was wondering, have you ever heard of a scale that they use to grade inequality in a society? It's called the Gini scale, G-I-N-I.
Right, and it goes from 0 to 1, and the higher the number, the worse the worse.
In fact,
it's called the Gini coefficient.
Was bringing out some figures, and he said that they went all the way back to ancient Rome, who rated 0.59 on that scale.
Right.
And he said, throughout history, all the way back to ancient Rome, when society or the world gets that high in inequality, you have revolution, overthrow, whatever you want to call it.
And collapse, yes.
Yeah. Take a guess what they're rating America right now.
I would guess it's probably in the 0.6 or 0.7 range.
0.89.
You're kidding.
No.
Wow. Yeah, Piketty talks about this some in his book, Capitalism. Oh, what's the title of his book? Capital in the 21st Century is Piketty's new book. But the people who really get into this are Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, who are the co-authors of two brilliant books on inequality. One is called Why Inequality Matters, and the other is called The Spirit Level. They're both British writers. I'm not sure exactly what their titles are, but the books are brilliant. And if you Google The Spirit Level, they've got a website that they've built that not only compares countries, but also compares individual states within the United States, and uses the Gini coefficient as their measure of inequality, and then looks at social ills. And what they find over and over and over again, Mark, and this is the fascinating thing, particularly on their website, and in the book, The Spirit Level, they've reproduced all the charts and graphs and things. What they find over and over and over again is that as the Gini coefficient goes up, as inequality goes up, so also do a whole bunch of social ills. And there's an absolute relationship. This is not correlation. This is causation. I mean, it might be both, but it's definitely there's causation here. And there's too many countries and too many states where you can absolutely draw these parallels, where you see as the Gini coefficient goes up, teenage pregnancies go up, premarital sex goes up, sexually transmitted diseases go up, drug use goes up, suicide goes up, school dropouts go up, the rate of school dropouts, suicides go up, homicides go up, burglary goes up. Say what? Homelessness. I'm sorry?
Homelessness.
Oh, yeah, homelessness goes up. You got to yell it out. Sorry. So anyhow, and this is one of the reasons why we really need to be working to have a more egalitarian and less unequal society, Mark.
Yeah, well, to paraphrase old Lee Camp, he said, you can take this as good news or bad news depending on your perspective. He said revolution's coming by his historical fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Who said that?
Lee Camp on Redacted Tonight. He said it's either good news or bad news depending on your perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, frankly, I think it's good news. It's bad news that it's where it is right now, but I agree. And Lee's a great guy. I used to work with Lee, and I love Lee. He's spectacular.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, and insanely funny. I mean, he's a brilliantly talented guy. But I believe also that, you know, revolution is coming. I don't think it's necessarily going to be any kind of an armed revolution, but I think a political. In fact, I think we've been at that point since 2008. I think the election of 2008 was an election in which we thought we were getting a revolutionary. Turned out we didn't. But, you know, that's what we hoped for, and I think then people voted for Trump thinking he was a revolutionary. I think we're still in that revolutionary moment. Mark, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program, taking your year-end calls. Mark Taylor Canfield in Seattle. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, best wishes to you and your family for the new year.
Thank you. Back at you, Mark.
It's always a pleasure hearing the cogent, intelligent dialogue on this program, which is a far cry from what I get in most media. But
thank you.
I wanted to let you know I'm putting together a video for my news report over at YouTube, the MTC Report. And it's about whether a sitting president can be indicted or charged with a crime. It's a follow-up to my piece at Daily Kos, and I wanted to call your attention to two articles by Charlie Savage at the New York Times. One is, can President Trump pardon himself? So that's a very interesting read. Charlie Savage is doing real journalism over there at the New York Times.
Yeah, but you know, there's a simple answer to that question. If his pardoning himself in any way has to do with avoiding impeachment, the Constitution prohibits him from doing that.
It's also pretty much a common practice in all courts that, you know, you cannot judge yourself in your own case.
Correct.
So that would go against all.
Correct. Although the presidential pardon power is not a Article III power. It's not a judicial power. It's an Article II power. It's a presidential power. So, you know, it may or may not, that long-held legal principle, I suspect that the Trump people would challenge on that basis. But the fact that the pardon power in the Constitution explicitly in the Constitution says except in cases of impeachment, you know, that I think gives us. But anyhow, cool. Okay, Mark.
Well, Georgetown University has a paper out, and it's on this issue, and it's really interesting because Professor Scott Howe says that there is no immunity as a matter of federal law. It's actually federal common law. So if there is no immunity in the U.S. Constitution for the sitting president, then actually, according to Professor Howe, and this is a paper put together by Susan Lowe Block for Georgetown University Law School, if it's true that there's no constitutional prohibition on indicting a standing president, then that means that this immunity can actually be changed by Congress. Congress could actually, according to Professor Scott Howe, it could actually restrict the scope of that immunity. It could eliminate the immunity entirely, or it could expand its usage. And that is under the interpretation by Professor Howe that there is no prohibition in the United States Constitution which creates temporary immunity for a sitting president. And this came up because of the Clinton versus Jones case during the presidency of Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
So these special prosecutors have a lot of power of discretion. Leon Jaworski back in the Watergate era, Ken Starr during the Clinton presidency, and now Robert Mueller could, if they wanted to, actually call for indictment. But I think in the past it's been considered practice and policy not to do that, but it is not. There is no prohibition on it.
Sovereign immunity or the immunity of sovereigns was something that I think the founders would have found repulsive. Sovereign immunity perhaps for the government, but not the immunity of sovereigns, which is old British common law. And yeah, makes sense to me. Mark, I got to move along, but thanks for the heads up on those things. And good luck with your series and your news reports. Paul in Lucerne, California. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was going to talk about just getting money out of politics, but you brought up the Vivoca story. A friend of mine is seriously, he does the ghost dance every year.
Right.
Actually smoked off Sitting Bull's peace pipe. You ever wonder why Sitting Bull always had the cross of Jesus? Because Jesus gave Vivoca the ghost dance. He taught him the ghost dance. And he actually gave him 2 miracles to have the government leave him alone. And you can go check this out in Carson City newspaper. My buddy showed me the article. The river actually ran uphill. That was one of the miracles Jesus gave Vivoca. And they told him, hey, this is going to be scary. The ghost dance Jesus taught him was because a lot of Native Americans, when they were killed, they were trapped in between worlds because of the way they were killed.
Right.
And the ghost dance freed them. And it was really super scary. That's why they killed him there, because they didn't want him doing that no more.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Because my buddy, like I said, he's a Native, and he goes to the ghost dance, and it's a really peaceful thing. It's a really awesome thing. And I don't know if you've ever seen any Indian ceremonies when they do their chants and when they do their prayers.
I have seen them, and I have participated in them. I have a
really
good friend who's a ghost dancer.
Awakening.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I
no,
mean,
it's powerful stuff. It's very powerful stuff. And
yeah, so that's my deal there. And one other thing, you know, you got to donate to Free Speech TV. You got to be part of the 2%, man.
There you go.
Free Speech TV ain't going to
yeah,
be
the fund. Paul, I get it, but the fund.
$5 to Free Speech TV. Gave him $5.
Yeah, but the fund drive is over, right? Okay, Paul, thank you very much. Yeah, the fund drive is over right now. Anyhow, Bobby in Kaiser, Oregon. Hey, Bobby, what's on your mind?
Hey, I have seen the future, Tom.
Oh, yeah?
Of financial transactions. Yeah, I saw a fascinating article about in the city of Hangzhou, China. They are already at 50% cashless and will soon be the first city in the world to be 100% cashless. And what they're doing is using facial recognition as your debit card.
Right.
And all the checkout stands have a little screen like the size of an iPad next to them, and you go and you buy your stuff, and you put your face by the screen, and it recognizes it, and then transfers the money from your account to the vendor's account.
Right, and because so many of the companies are actually government-owned or partially government-owned, the government knows everything you do and every place you go all the time.
Do you think the entire world will be using facial recognition soon?
Probably, yeah. Technology. Can you think of any example, Bobby, when technology has been developed and not deployed?
Oh, no, not really. Hey, can I ask you a quick question, please?
Sure.
Okay, I've been hearing you talk a lot about, I've been listening to you 5.5 years now every day. I'm a truck driver. And I've been hearing you talk a lot lately about how the comparisons between what's happened in the United States and what happened in pre-Nazi Germany and in Italy and other countries.
Real quick, Bobby, we're going to hit the music
here.
here.
What about the differences? Like, we have the FBI, we have outside watch groups. What about the differences?
Germany had all those things, Bobby. Germany had the checks and balances. Germany had all those things. But the Enabling Acts in late 33 or early 34, the Enabling Acts were the death of democracy in Germany. And I encourage you to look it up or read Shearer's book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. Bobby, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today. Take a break from politics. We're reading from Dr. Neil Bernard's book, The Get Healthy, Go Vegan Cookbook. And this is from the introduction. This book holds the culinary secrets to lifelong health. These 125 easy and delicious recipes will lure you with their aromas and flavors, many familiar, some new. But what awaits you is more than simply a treat for the taste buds. These recipes are powerful. They will help you trim down, lower your cholesterol, bring your blood sugar and blood pressure under control, and get your energy back. And if you're healthy now, these wonderful foods will help you stay that way. As it stands, most people are not eating very well. In North America, our dietary staples are not vegetables, fruits, brown rice, or other healthful foods. No, for many people, a meal is not a meal unless there's a big chunk of meat in the middle of the plate. A little pile of green beans or corn tossed in as an afterthought. That was the way it was when I grew up, and I suspect something similar may be true for you too. As a result of our less than healthful eating habits, Americans tend to be heavier than people from other countries. And perhaps surprisingly, we do not live as long as they do. Even with our high-tech medical care, Americans are likely to be felled by heart attacks, cancer, diabetes, or other problems. Our lives are about 4 years shorter on average compared with the people of Japan, where the dietary staples are reversed. Rice, noodles, and vegetables are mainstays, while meat serves traditionally just as a flavoring. And our quality of life suffers too. We are less able to work, dance, or play tennis in our later years, and some are more likely to be on medications or in the hospital. And things are worsening year by year. Back in the 1960s, bacon and eggs showed up at breakfast, and roast beef and gravy were on America's dinner plates. Lunch may or may not have been another meaty meal. And then McDonald's arrives, as did Burger King, Wendy's, and Pizza Hut. They were not selling broccoli, carrots, and asparagus sushi. They were not selling, even in the smallest cities, these fast food restaurants ushered in a load of meat, cheese, and soda that pushed fat and calories to unprecedented levels in our diets. Here are the numbers. When the federal government began keeping records in 1909, the average American ate about 124 pounds of meat a year. By 1970, that figure had soared to over 175 pounds. As the new millennium arrived, the figure burst through the 200-pound per person per year mark. A century ago, the average American ate less than 4 pounds of cheese in an entire year. By 2009, that figure was over 33 pounds, thanks to cheeseburgers, cheese pizza, and cheese on just about everything else. Sugar intake has risen by about 20 pounds per person per year just since 1970. In other words, our eating habits were never very good in North America, but in recent decades, they've gotten a whole lot worse. An ever-increasing load of meat, cheese, and sugar makes weight problems inevitable. Today, 2/3 of Americans are beyond the boundaries of a healthy weight, and American children are in the worst shape of any generation in the history of our nation. The results are not just apparent on the bathroom scale. They also show up in unprecedented numbers of people lining up in pharmacies to buy diet aids, insulin, cholesterol-lowering drugs, and blood pressure medication. And the problem is not limited to North America. India, China, and much of the rest of the world, where healthy grains and vegetables have historically played major roles, now follow America's lead, loading up on burgers and pizza. And as Western dietary habits spread worldwide, Western diseases like cancer and diabetes follow right along. The answer is to take advantage of the food our bodies are designed for. Vegetables and fruits provide beta-carotene and lycopene to help shore up our body's defenses against cancer, along with thousands of other nutrients with health power that cannot be matched by meat-based diets. Whole grains and beans are loaded with fiber to help trim our waistlines and cut cholesterol, not to mention plenty of protein, iron, and calcium. By setting aside animal-derived products, meat, dairy products, and eggs, you can reach a level of health and well-being that you may never have expected that you could enjoy. At the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in Washington, D.C., we conduct research projects to study how foods affect health. We also sponsor educational programs to help people change their eating habits and improve their health. Some of the people who participate in our program simply want to expand their repertoire of healthful foods. Others have a few pounds they'd like to lose. Many have a lot of pounds to lose, not to mention fairly serious health problems that they really have to conquer. And yet so many people do not know about the power of healthful eating. That's why we wrote this book. We want to help people understand how fueling the body with the right foods can lead to an enormous health payoff. We aim to provide a menu that is as close to perfect as humanly possible. And we hope to show how easy it is to prepare truly healthy foods and what a delight it can be to serve them to family and friends. I am a physician. After completing medical school and residency at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., I began my professional life as a psychiatrist, helping people overcome serious behavioral problems. Later, I had a major career change. Having led several research studies on diet and health, I am now an adjunct associate professor of medicine at the Department of Internal Medicine at George Washington University School of Medicine. I also head the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which promotes healthful diets and conducts research, and also promotes ethical research, pushes for improved food policies, and hosts many information-packed websites that I hope you will visit. The Get Healthy, Go Vegan cookbook by Dr. Neil Bernard, MD.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Donald Trump yesterday was at Mar-a-Lago, and a reporter for the New York Times, Michael Schmidt, was in the bar, and Trump was walking by, and he said, "Hey, let's talk." And they had this conversation, and almost a half hour long. The interesting thing is that Michael Schmidt did not challenge Trump on anything. This was not like in a press conference where the press would say, well, what do you think about X? And Trump would say, well, there's no global warming because it's so cold in New York right now. And then the press would say, but wait a minute, the scientists say that was predicted as a consequence of global warming because the Arctic is melting and it stabilizes the northern, latitude weather. But, of course, Michael Schmidt didn't say that. But, on the one hand, so he didn't challenge Trump. But on the other hand, to give Michael Schmidt to cut him some slack, sort of like Billy Bush, I guess. My guess is that had he challenged Trump on anything, he wouldn't have gotten 30 minutes worth of verbal salad from Trump. But one of the things that I think Trump said that was really, really interesting, and in fact, arguably shocking, and this is from the interview. He said, quote, he was talking about Trump running for re-election in 3 years. And he said, I'm going to win another 4 years. And the reason why is because newspapers, television, and all forms of media will tank if I'm not there, because without me, their ratings will be going down the tubes. Without me, the New York Times will indeed not be the failing New York Times, but the failed New York Times. So they basically have to let me win. And eventually, probably 6 months before the election, they'll be loving me because they're saying, please, please don't lose Donald Trump. Well, in this regard, Trump is largely right. Remember Les Moonves, the chairman or CEO of CBS, talking to his shareholders on the phone? This was before the election, and he said, this Trump thing, Trump may be terrible for America, but he sure is good for CBS. We are making money hand over fist. Well, he didn't say we were making money hand over fist, but words to that effect. But he said it sure is good for CBS. In the first hour of the program, I was talking about how even the video game you're playing on your cell phone that you think is just a damn video game, but in fact is spyware that's listening to absolutely everything around you all the time to try and figure out what TV programs you watch and when and what your habits are like, because data like that is saleable now. And I mean, arguably, the Cambridge Analytica buying that kind of data about us, principally from Facebook, this highly sorted, super detailed, highly personal data on every individual voter in the United States is how Trump became president. But everything has been turned into data and money from data. It's like we have financialized everything. Education in this country. It used to be understood that education was there for the benefit of society, right? The reason why we have schools, the reason why we did the whole, let's have free primary education, K through 12. Well, originally it was 1 through 12, and then it became K through 12, I think in the 1950s, and maybe the 40s. In fact, it used to be back in the 20s, it was 1 through 8. And then we expanded it to 1 through 12, and then we expanded it to K through 12, and the rest of the world expanded free public education to pre-K through PhD or MD, right? All the way through, or JD or whatever it may be, as far as you want to go in college. Whereas here in the United States, we're doing the exact opposite of that. We have financialized education. Keep in mind, the purpose of education is to build a strong society. It's to build a strong and healthy nation. Ellen Brown is blogging over at her blog, webofdebt.com, and she writes about the GI Bill's impact. And she talks about, the GI Bill was we're talking about the 1940, whatever year it was, version of it, the one that my dad and Louise's dad both went to college on. Louise's dad ended up the Assistant Attorney General for the state of Michigan as a result of being able to go to college on the GI Bill and get his law degree. My dad dropped out 2 years into college because my mom got pregnant with me, but his goal was to become a college professor. Well, here's how it worked out. The GI Bill, this is quoting Ellen Brown, funded the education of 450,000 engineers, which I would add led to the development of radio, television, transistors, put the man on the moon, all that stuff. Funded the education of 450,000 engineers, 240,000 accountants, 238,000 teachers, 91,000 scientists, 67,000 doctors, 22,000 dentists, 14 Nobel laureates, 14 future Nobel laureates, 24 Pulitzer Prize winners, 3 Supreme Court justices, and 3 presidents of the United States. And how much did this cost us to educate all these millions of people? Nothing. In fact, it made us a 700% return on investment. Again, quoting Ellen Brown, rather than costing the government, the GI Bill turned out to be one of the best investments our government ever made. The legislation is estimated to have cost $50 billion in today's money and to have returned $350 billion to the economy, a nearly 7-fold return. So you have free university tuition now in, all the usual suspects, plus Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Germany, Norway, Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Sweden, Turkey. It's there. It's free, just not here. And meanwhile, we have student debt slavery, which was the title of Ellen Brown's piece. And this, goes back to, okay, we've figured out a way to turn, the game you use on your app into making money. Well, that's the private sector. Maybe that, that's what they do. Now, if you don't want that happening, if you don't want them putting spyware on your phone, then either you depend on the marketplace to warn you, or you depend on a government agency to say, this isn't right. The people don't like this, so we're going to pass a law against it. But the financialization of a game or an app on your phone is a whole different thing from the financialization of an entire educational system. And that's what's happened here in this era of Reaganomics. You'll recall before Reagan became governor of California,
college education in California was completely free. Reagan ended that. When he became president of the United States, college education in much of the United States, if not free, was super cheap. It was not just possible, it was the normal experience of middle-class Americans to work a summer job or work a part-time job, and that provided them enough money to pay for their college education. Prior to Reagan, college debt was, in this country, outside of graduate degrees, was virtually unknown. So we've gone from basically having no student debt in this country to having over $1 trillion worth of student debt. Ellen Brown points out slavery by debt has continued to this day and is particularly evident in the plight of students. Graduates leaving college with a diploma and massive debt on their backs averaged $37,000 in debt last year, 2016. Government student loan portfolio now is $1.37 trillion, which is the second highest consumer debt category behind mortgage debt. More people owe more money as student debt than as credit card debt. Student debt has risen 164% in 25 years, while wages, median wages, have only gone up 1.6%. And students can't walk away from this debt. Right? In 1998, Congress privatized Sallie Mae, which was offering student loans, and changed the law so that your unemployment benefits, tax refunds, and even Social Security checks could be tapped to ensure repayment. And then in 2005, they extended that to private for-profit lenders with the Bankruptcy Reform Act. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
This is not only a time bomb waiting to go off in our faces, much like the mortgage thing was in 2007, but it's also hurting us as a country. And welcome back. Rick in Ogden, Utah. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Yes. I just wanted to thank you for all you've done against the Electoral College. And that it's just hard to overstate the impact it's had on this country since the year 2000, you know, when Bush got in, losing the popular vote, and Trump did the same thing. And one of my big disappointments this year is with the mainstream media, because they actually remind me of what Henry David Thoreau said when he said that for every person hacking at the roots of evil, there's 100 or 1,000 hacking at the leaves and branches of evil. And so the media always criticizing Trump's travel bans and his cabinet appointees and so on. But the fact is we wouldn't have any of that if we just had voter equality. And I don't understand why the media, which generally it favors racial equality, it favors gender equality, why can't it favor voter equality?
Because the media does not favor economic equality. The media,
and you're right, yeah.
The media is owned by millionaires and billionaires. The people that you see on television are millionaires. They answer to billionaires by and large. And they have no interest whatsoever in income inequality. If they did, or in wealth equality, if they did, you would hear about it all the time.
That's a good answer, and I think that's true. But there's a lot of points about it where it's so much worse today than it was when the nation was founded. When it was founded, Virginia was the biggest state, Delaware was the smallest, and the ratio was 11-1. Right. Well, now it's California and Wyoming, and it's like 68-1. And I mean, at what point do we do this? I'll be honest, I'm in my late 60s, and I think I'm going to go through life and always have my votes be just an absolute waste of time and irrelevance because
you're in Utah?
Yeah, I live in Utah. And it's too much to ask that my vote count the same as every other participant in a specific election. And, it just, my money is valuable. I could send my money to Ohio or a swing state or something like that. but my vote is absolutely worthless, and I might as well live in Africa or something. And,
well, at least for president, because of the Electoral College. And I agree with you in your concern about the Electoral College. George W. Bush lost the popular vote by 500,000. Donald Trump lost it by 3 million. Neither one of them should have become president. The Electoral College was put into place to protect the slave states initially, not, you know, the story, the mythology that we hear is that it was put into place to protect little tiny Delaware. Little tiny Delaware certainly probably liked the idea of having 2 senators. But I don't think that they cared that much about the Electoral College. The Electoral College was for those states that had large black populations that were not allowed to vote and small white populations that were. And they wanted those states to have a say in who was in the White House that was, you know, disproportionate to their white population. And that was the whole 3/5 compromise. So they could they would count 3/5 of the slaves in those states for purposes of apportionment. You know, for Congress, for the congressional vote. But yeah, this was all wrapped up in slavery. I'm with you, Rick. It's time to do something about this. Rick, thanks for the call. I got to run. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Last day of the year. Your thoughts, David in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I was listening to your 21st century economic strategies, and I just heard economists talking about a steady state economy instead of the constant growth, which is destructive and dangerous.
Well, in fact, a better metaphor, David, just to insert this real quickly, is in biological systems, when you have constant, steady growth, it's called cancer.
Right.
Yeah. So anyhow, back to you.
This is never brought up by the 2 parties. They are always talking about, well, the last party had poor growth, we're going to have good growth, you know, that sort of thing. And it's not rational.
Well, it is in a country where the population is growing. It makes sense that if you're going to be adding, you know, 10,000 people a week to the population of your country, and you've been doing that for generations, then, you know, the 10,000 people a week from 20 years ago who are now entering the labor force, you need to create more jobs for them. But then you have to ask the question, is it desirable to have a continuously expanding population? And Japan has answered that question, no. And everybody said, oh, they're going to have a disaster when their population ages out, and there's going to be no young people to take care of them, blah-de-blah-de-blah. It turns out not the case. Older people have plenty of money, and there's lots of young people who are, you know, more than willing to do what they can to aid them and support them. The government has a very, very good social welfare program in Japan. It works just fine. And you know, we could go into even negative population growth. And I know that not all the economists, but many of the economists out there, when you talk about negative population growth, they start getting hysterical. I think, which is what Japan is experiencing, I think it could be a good thing. If you take the wealth of the nation and divide it by the population, that's the wealth per capita. And if if the wealth is remaining the same but the population is declining, that means that everybody's getting incrementally richer.
Well, would this be heretical for any party to talk about this?
I doubt it, because it requires an understanding of economics that goes beyond a bumper sticker, and that doesn't work in politics.
Well, let's hope they start talking about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is the kind of stuff that this is where, you know, where you actually want policy wonks. You want, you know, like the guys who sat around with Franklin Roosevelt, or who sat around, you know, with Lyndon Johnson and came up with the New Deal and the Great Society. These just, you know, wonks, basically. People who are sitting around saying, okay, you know, if we do this, then this might happen, and let's try a bunch of things and let's experiment. It's not all going to work, but some, you know, which is the complete opposite, of course, of what Republicans want to do. Republicans want to simply shut down government and return all the money, except for the military money, where that's going to the defense contractors, to their billionaire donors.
Right, everything's for sale.
Right.
The value is in the money, not in the community.
Yep.
The community is the value in reality. The community builds your strength, and it makes you feel good about who you are and what you're doing. And you can't isolate yourself with money. It's very destructive of the personality, I think.
Well, and that's the point that I regularly make on this program, which is we have to start with this fundamental question, which you know, arguably Adam Smith laid out in Theory of Moral Sentiments in 1770, whatever year it was he wrote that, 73 I think it was, and which is the question: is the economy here for the people? In other words, do we as a government create a currency and courts and laws and all, you know, banking systems and all this stuff necessary to have an economy? Did we create this economy for the benefit of the maximum benefit of the most people, or is the economy here to serve? In other words, is the economy here to serve the nation and the people, or is the economy here to serve the people who own most of the economy? And clearly, since Reaganomics, we have been in that second world. Prior to Reagan, we were in that first world. And the first world being that the economy is here to serve the people. And that is, in essence, the core message of healthy populism. Unhealthy populism, Donald Trump variety populism, contains an element of that. I mean, you know, he campaigned on that, but it's not how he's governing. But healthy populism is like, you know, for the people, you know, populi, the Greek word for people. And so,
what was the book that you mentioned that talked about this strategy? Something about the donut hole?
Oh, yeah, Donut Economics. There's a book called Donut Economics out right now that is a really, really good exposition on this. I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the author, but it should be easy to find. And we've had her on the program. There's a YouTube floating around of my interviewing her. It might be more than one, in fact. So, yeah.
All right.
David, I got to move along, but thanks you for the call, and thanks for listening to WGRN there in Columbus, Ohio. Kevin in Clifton, Virginia. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Happy holidays to you.
Thank you. Back at you.
Actually, I ran across his website. They call it the Venice Project. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's supposed to be this one man's ideal. He pretty much created this almost utopia, basically resources-based economy. So I guess it's kind of likened to Star Trek ideal. You know, resource-based economy, things structured for the good instead of for destructive means. So I wonder, have you ever heard of this project before? It's about a guy named Jack. I can't think of his last name at this point.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, Kevin, but I don't know any details of it. I'll have to look it up when we get off the air. But so he's proposing changes in culture or in the economy? Or both?
Both, actually. The environment, the human factors. It's basically the economy is supposed to stem towards the rest of society. If we're not, you know, I guess the theory is we're not based on money, then that would pretty much eliminate greed. So we based on resources like science and whatnot, then we can base on the society growing instead of competing against each other.
Interesting.
Like now.
I'll have to check it out. Kevin, thank you for the information. Thanks for the heads up.
Appreciate you, Tom.
I'm telling you, we've got some of the smartest people who listen to or watch this program on Earth. Thank you, Kevin. We'll be back. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. I want to get into this rant about punishment, and of course, we got a full board of calls. I'll pick up your calls too right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So back with all that in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody.
What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified, we have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations. Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home, a temple to the new India, or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid.
The grass was dry in patches. Bits have fallen off in neat rectangles. Clearly, trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a ghost story by Arundhati Roy.
ThomHartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and David in West County, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how's it going? Thanks for all you do. Just a quick one. A couple calls ago talking about one person, one vote. Spot on. I believe every Democratic legislator should be screaming for that immediately, and that would solve a lot of the problems we're in. The real reason I'm calling you is I was lucky enough to catch your show yesterday, and a gentleman called you up and he asked you about where's the compromise, and one of his chief complaints was apparently on your website.
Keep in mind,
you had,
Donald Trump
some tushy
is based...
paper with Donald's face on it. And you quickly said, "Oh, I'll take that down." And I was kind of disheartened by that. I was like, first of all, I'm a youth and outdoor science educator. I work with kids, helping them grow up. And the moral grotesqueness of this man, I mean, we could go on. There's no sense going on about it. But I honestly do believe the only reason he's in is the Republicans are letting him be there so they can loot the Treasury, which they more or less just did.
Yeah.
And I find that on our side, or the side of progressives, people who care about one another, we have a decorum. We have a certain level of respect that we keep and whatnot. I once had a picture of Bush Jr. side by side with some monkeys. They were famous pictures at the time during the illegal Iraq War.
Right, the see no
evil. In a park, and I was told to take him down. And I was specifically because, visitors to the park don't want to see that. And I'm thinking, well, people in the world don't want to see an illegal war, and we need to be aware of it. And at least it's using humor. I would recommend you put the thing back up. I find it a pretty innocuous way to say, hey, this man is a con man. He's a criminal. His base is unabashedly what it is.
David,
the only reason, Tom, to take it down would be it's an insult to toilet paper.
Yeah, David, pardon my jumping in here, but I see that I just have 12 seconds left. It was actually, our show is both on radio and television, and it was on the set that people watching us on television would see. And it just occurred to me that that's a little over the top. That, just because, Trump and his, we're not hitting the break. I thought we were, I'm sorry, I was reading my meters wrong.
Sure.
So I've got a little more time here. So anyhow, it was on TV, and I just, it's a little over the top. I mean, if it was on my website, if we were selling, toilet paper that's got Trump's face on it, I got no problem with that. But
okay, that makes sense.
Having it on your set.
Just to complete it then, since I might have another second or two, I work with students that come for a period of time, and they have parent chaperones. And to be blunt, I don't talk about this situation at work. It's not appropriate. But then again, our country is in peril right now. And if this man actually showed up, I mean Donald, as a parent chaperone and behaved the way he always does, he would be sent home pretty quick. And the authorities would be contacted because...
we had an earlier caller, David, who made the point that if Trump wasn't rich and had behaved the way he's behaved, he'd be in jail.
Yes, absolutely. He has presented himself as a self-described sexual predator.
Right.
Period. That doesn't even begin to touch what he's done to our country.
Right. He's bragged about it. Yeah, and those things that he has bragged about, both to Billy Bush and to Howard Stern and to others, are all things that if he was just, if he was a bus driver and he did that, he'd be in jail. I mean, it's just that simple.
Well, I know that if I go through a stop sign, I get a speeding ticket. It's really that simple.
Yep. Yeah. Or if you just walk up to some woman on the street and grab her crotch, I mean, you're going to go to jail. Apparently not.
And as well you should. Yeah. I'm still appalled that this is going on. So, just don't be afraid to say what it is. This is what it is. We have a criminal con man in office, and it's illegitimate.
Yeah. No, I have no fear of saying that, David, and I completely agree with you. I just when that guy called and it just hit me that I was descending to Trump's level. And
that makes sense. I hadn't seen it on your TV program.
Yeah, and it was the 10-year-old
yeah.
boy in me, right? I mean, we've all got that little kid in us, and I was like, oh, look at that, isn't that funny?
I got away with the Bush and monkey picture in a pretty high-profile window in a heavily used park for months before someone finally said, hey.
Yeah.
And that's specifically because most people were happy to see it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and I'm guessing a lot of people thought that the Trump toilet paper was funny, but it's served its time. David, I got to move along, but thank you for the call.
Hey, thanks again, Tom, for all you do.
Sure, good talking with you. Alan in Muskegon, Michigan. Hey, Alan, what's up?
Well, Tom, I wanted to talk to you about the use of language and linguistics. You know, for years, people have conflated the powers of government with the rights of individuals. And I challenge anyone to look at the Constitution and find anywhere where the rights of the government are expressed. The only place where the rights are expressed are in the amendments having to do with individual rights, with personhood.
Right. In fact, Alan, if I may, real quickly, just interject, and then you can continue. Barack Obama famously said during the 2008 campaign that the Constitution is a negative Bill of Rights. Now, Fox News was all over attacking him for that, but he was absolutely right. And in fact, once he got elected, Fox News started, well, I don't know that they were using that phrase, but Republicans started talking that way too. And what he meant was, as a negative Bill of Rights, what it does is it limits the rights, that is to say, the powers and authorities of government, and not necessarily of individuals, but of government. And so, I mean, that was the whole point of the Constitution, was to have a limited government. Back to you, Alan.
Well, certainly that was the original intent. And as I said, there's nowhere in the Constitution that expressly gives, implicitly gives any rights to any government official as a government official, whether it be the policeman who stops you on the street and says, I have the right to search you. No, he doesn't. He may have the power to search you.
Well, yes and no, because ever since 1803, when the Supreme Court declared that they could interpret what the Constitution actually meant, and they started writing laws. The first time they did that, actually, after the 1803 Marbury case, was 1856 in Dred Scott. But in any case, they started basically writing laws, and the Supreme Court on a number of occasions has found that, yeah, police officers do have, well, arguably, to use your language, the power to search you if they choose, or under certain circumstances.
Well, when the man brought up the Kinney code, or the Kinney number, as 0.89 for us right now.
Yeah, although I looked on Wikipedia and it says it's 5.54 right now, but I don't.
Oh, well,
I'm not sure that he was.
I'm not sure how up to date they may be.
Well, yeah,
It occurs to me as we listen to the Trump administration, agency by agency, changing the language that scientists can use, so that, for example, you can't say fetus in the CDC anymore.
Right.
What do they want? What they want is unborn child, which is not a scientific term.
Right.
This is and it's a change throughout the language of science is now being abolished.
Well, and politics,
political speech.
Yeah, and the politics of this are actually even being used to sell product. Notice carefully, there is a television ad for a pharmaceutical right now, where in that ad they say, do not take this drug if you are pregnant, as it may harm an unborn child. There is no medical, as you correctly point out, there's no such medical term as unborn child. And so what are they doing? It's a shout out to the, what would you call them? The forced birth crowd? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, it's a shout out to the people who are anti-science. I mean, we just came up, what was it, just the other day, 7 words that the CDC can't use to discuss health issues.
Yeah.
They've changed the language with regard to climate change. I think we are living with an enabling act right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Enabling Acts allowed Hitler to shut down the newspapers, which he did. And it allowed Hitler to ban political parties, which he did. And neither of those things have happened in the United States. But I would argue that we don't need to shut down our newspapers because they, by and large, not universally, but many of our newspapers and radio and television stations have been acquired by very wealthy corporations that have very explicit right-wing agendas, and they're using those media to advance those agendas, in some ways subtle, in some ways very overt. And you see this with like Sinclair Broadcasting, you see this with Fox News, you see this actually with, even like Meet the Press, it's Meet the Republicans, really. And so, yeah, I don't disagree with you. Alan, I got to move along, but thank you. Oh, hang on just a second, Steve. It looks like we're about to hit a break. I should have waited. Yeah, I've got 30 seconds. I shouldn't have dumped Alan. But anyhow, that's my take on that. And I think that the issue that we have to really address right now in the United States is money in our political system and how that money is corrupting our political system, but it's also corrupting our media system, because so many millions of dollars are going into political advertising, and those political advertisings now are supporting the media. And that's exactly what Donald Trump was talking about when he talked to the New York Times yesterday. And he said, the media is going to make me president in 2020. He didn't say just like they did in 2016, but they did. They gave him billions. Some argued $2 billion worth of free publicity. And it's continuing. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls, the news of the day, and my thoughts on all of the above in just a moment. And welcome back. James in Wichita, Kansas. Hey, James, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
I got to say, boy, that TP thing, I shouldn't have said anything.
Say what?
But let me start with the TP, the toilet paper issue.
Okay.
But let me say something real quick. The guy was talking about vocabulary, and you were talking about that book that the lady wrote about slavery debt for students.
Yeah. It's actually an article. You can find it over on Alternate.
So why does she call it, Holocaust debt? She doesn't. That's not fair to go around using that word in those terms, because it's not slavery at all.
Right.
People need to be more sensitive when they use that word and stop just slanging it around like it's okay.
I agree with you, James. But let me add
no idea of what that is. So just shut up when it comes to that, because it's not free labor. Second part, I want to sit there and say, when you were talking about that scale about, I think you call it the IG scale. I'm not sure. But let me understand this.
It's the Gini coefficient.
Where is that concerning illegal immigrants compared to descendants of slaves? How about that? Where's the median compared to illegal immigrants who come into the country and those who are descendants of slaves who have been here for over 400 years? Where is that parallel?
So you're making the pitch that I've been hearing from conservatives for a number of years that
I'm making
black people...
I'm making a pitch on what I just heard today. No.
Can I finish my sentence, please,
James? I just heard a few minutes ago.
May I finish my sentence?
Oh, go ahead.
It sounds to me like the pitch that you're making is that black people should be worried about immigrants taking their jobs. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm saying I say
and therefore black people should join the Republicans in trashing immigrants.
I didn't say that at all. I said, where is that scale of? Well, look at the scale of. Like I said before, if you have an immigrant who comes into the country who's here illegally and they get educated from K through 12, as you were saying before, and that person is a non-speaking person of English, but they hear Spanish at home all the time, but they have to be taught English all the way up through the 12th grade. Once an American gets into college, not in the college, but in the 9th grade, we only started in the 9th grade learning how to speak Spanish, so we only get 4 years of Spanish. So already right then you have a person, especially for a person, a descendant of the slave, they already have an advantage over you because they're bilingual. Do you understand that?
I do. I'm a big fan of bilingualism. I think we should be teaching second and third languages in elementary school.
Okay.
What does
fine,
that have to do with anything?
Done. So as long as they have the advantage over us, I think it hurts us. I don't think that's any kind of a compromise there.
Well, then James, why don't we start lobbying to teach Spanish in our schools at grade 1?
Because I'd rather lobby to keep them out and let us get our foothold in first before we start letting them in.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree, broadly speaking, that countries need to control their labor supplies. They absolutely do. This is the last chapter, or the next to the last chapter in my book, Rebooting the American Dream. We've got to get control. It's not control of our borders, though. The thing is, James, keep in mind, it's not that we have an illegal immigrant problem in the United States. We have an illegal employer problem in the United States.
No, okay,
now let me finish this, James. Prior to 1986, it was illegal in the United States to hire somebody who was not a citizen. And people regularly, white employers by and large, regularly got put in jail for hiring people who were not citizens. Reagan ended that. And that's when the doormat went out. And corporations are literally, right now, as we speak, you've got meat packing plants in the upper Midwest who are advertising in Spanish in newspapers in Mexico for labor. That should be put an end to. James, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Yep. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Steve in Newport, Rhode Island. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. How are you doing today?
Good. What's up?
Good. Yeah, I actually work at the country's first offshore wind farm here in Rhode Island. It's a pretty cool project.
Oh, wow.
But, I come from a background in oil and gas, believe it or not. So I've kind of seen both sides of it.
Energy is energy.
My question, energy is energy. My question to you is, if we're talking about creating jobs and updating our infrastructure, what's the argument for perpetuating the use of, sources of energy such as coal, natural gas, things like that, other than special interests? What's the argument?
There is none. The only argument for maintaining a carbon-based economy is that some very wealthy and powerful people have built their fortunes on carbon, and they want to continue to make more money on carbon, period. I mean, can you think of any argument? Solar power and wind power are now, if you strip out all the subsidies for carbon and you strip out all the subsidies, for coal, gas, natural gas, and oil, and if you strip out all the subsidies for solar and wind are cheaper right now than any fossil fuel in terms of generating power at most civilized latitudes. Right? I mean, you go too far north, it doesn't work any longer. But pretty much that's it. And there is no reason for us not to. I mean, we could be 100%, green right now. China is moving in this direction so fast, it's breathtaking. They just rolled out a solar highway yesterday. I don't know if you caught the story. I read it on the air. It was just a little 30-second thing, but they just rolled out a solar highway where the solar panels they've got transparent concrete. They're making concrete out of glass. And they've got, or something, it's transparent, and they have solar panels on the road with a hard surface over the top of it that you can drive a truck on, and the solar panels generate electricity. If it snows, they use that electricity to melt the snow, so the roads are always open and clean, number one. And number two, they power these giant coils in the road that transmit electricity up to the cars and trucks that are driving over the top of the road. So as you're driving down the solar road, the solar energy is being transmitted into your car, and your car's battery is recharging. They're doing this right now in China. They're actually doing it.
It's incredible, yeah.
And we're sitting around going, oh, gee, we need more coal from West Virginia. Really?
Yeah. Yep, it's incredible. And, I mean, creating these jobs, engineering, maritime, finance, et cetera, that drives a demand for education for those jobs.
Yep.
And that creates kind of a forward-looking feedback loop to drive the economy, job growth, energy independence. The list goes on. At the same time, weaning us off fossil fuels.
Yep.
So it just boggles my mind. trying to come up with a sane argument against this.
There is no sane argument for it. In my opinion, the vast majority of this administration and the Republican Party's denial of climate change, and they're taking an axe to regulations that would and policies that would move us off fossil fuels and into green energy, are purely there because a handful of billionaires and multimillionaires, and very, very large corporations that are invested in trillions of dollars of investment in carbon are able to be the tail that wags the dog because money plays such a large role in American politics. And this is why countries like France has announced that they're going to be carbon-free by 2035. Germany is going to be carbon-free and nuclear-free by 2040. That's their goal. Maybe it was 2050 is one or the other. China's looking at this. They've set a goal 20 years out. All around the world, you've got countries that are just saying, that's it, we're done with carbon. And here in the United States, we're like, we got to dig up more coal. We got to do away with Bears Ears because there's some coal there, maybe some uranium. How about that? We could have more nuclear power plants. Isn't Fukushima wonderful? We are the village idiots, Steve, and we're the village idiots, or we're behaving like the village idiots, because these large corporations that build these nuclear power plants and that are invested in fossil fuels, and the petro billionaires and the nuclear billionaires that they create own our political system. That's the beginning and end of it. Steve, I got to move along, but thank you. Excellent call, excellent question. Andy in Arlington, Virginia. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Hey, I'm in Bluemont now, but there's a woman running against Joe Manchin, a Bernicrat.
Yeah.
Paula Jean, 2018.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. And a couple weeks ago, you had a Native American taking you about tribalism.
Right.
Why don't we just call it objectivism, like Alicia Rosenbaum, a.k.a. Ayn Rand, wanted to call it?
Objectivism is still called objectivism. There's an objectivist society. There's an Ayn Rand society that promotes objectivism.
When you talk,
but objectivism is just a fancy way of gussying up the philosophy of selfishness, basically.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that way everybody can get on the Ayn Rand site and see what a loon she is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she definitely was that. Andy, thanks for the call. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to make one more holler at you before the year was out. I wanted to talk what you were talking about earlier about the school systems, and I was agreeing with you about how they should be free and how we've been exploited, especially the American black people and other peoples of color, and truly here in Chicago, man. I mean, in Chicago, they have closed over 50 schools, given public money to private schools up north, giving another over $50 million to a playground, a Navy pier, and then taking another, and there's another 50. There's some $150 million that Ron Emanuel has dogged or exploited out of the school system here in Chicago, and using for other things, and you can really see it, especially on the west and south sides of Chicago. And now he wants to bring in, use $2 billion to bring in Amazon, and want to put them, I think, somewhere up north or wherever, instead of putting them on the west side.
Yeah, everybody wants to throw money at Amazon and Facebook and these other companies. It's amazing. Maine, I don't have an easy answer, but thanks for raising a tough issue. I appreciate the call. It's always nice to hear from you, and thanks for listening to WCPT. We'll be right back in the next hour. Selfishness and Republican Jesus.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Today on the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, we're reading from Barbara Honegger's book, October Surprise. The October Surprise the book is about was the 1980 Reagan campaign led by Bill Casey, who Reagan later made the head of the CIA, but he was Reagan's campaign director in 1980, about their actions with the Iranian government, cutting a deal where if the Iranians would hold the hostages throughout the election of 1980 to make Jimmy Carter look bad and weak, then if they won the election, they would sell weapons to Iran, which, of course, is a deal that they kept. We know of this as the Iran-Contra scandal. So I'm reading from the very last chapter. It's the epilogue, and it's titled A Kinder, Gentler Nation. President Reagan signed intelligence authorizations in 1984 and 1985, which were considered licenses to kill, according to top government officials. As we have seen, Oliver North and Amiram Nir's U.S.-Israeli covert operations were authorized by a still-secret accord, never revealed to congressional intelligence committees as required by law, which may have also authorized political assassinations in the name of counterterrorism. We have seen that Vice President George Bush, this is the elder, met with Amiram Nir in Israel in late 1986, when he could have signed the accord with Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, for whom Nir worked. Author Seymour Hersh has charged Oliver North with being President Reagan's assassination planner. We've reviewed reports that North boasted that anyone who leaked or threatened to reveal the administration's secret Iran initiative would be killed, and that some of the North Secord Hakim team were reportedly involved in political assassinations under the umbrella of counterterrorism. Given this context, it's instructive to note what has happened to many of the individuals who were reportedly involved in or knew about the secret negotiations between Iran and the 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign, and or about secret U.S. arms deliveries to the Khomeini regime in the early 1980s. So then she goes through the list of people. Dead: William Casey, CIA director, who reportedly attended meetings in Paris, France on October 19 and 20, 1980 with Iranian officials and agents of French intelligence to arrange an arms for hostages delay deal with Iran. The morning of Casey's first scheduled under oath testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the secret Iran initiative, he was struck by seizures in his CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and underwent speech incapacitating left brain surgery shortly thereafter. Had he lived to testify, according to a lifelong friend and counsel, Milton Gould, Casey would have told, quote, the entire truth, end quote. He died on May 6, 1987. Dead: Amiram Nir died November 30th, 1988, in a plane crash in Mexico. Nir, who resigned in March of 1988, had been chief counterterrorism advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres. He was Oliver North's Israeli counterpart in the near-North covert operations covered by a still-secret accord reportedly signed by Peres and President Reagan, or according to some U.S. government sources, by someone at a lower level. Easily Vice President George Bush during his late 1986 meeting with Nir in Jerusalem, when Nir briefed Bush on the Iran arms initiative. Informed sources suspect sabotage of Nir's plane when Oliver North sought to introduce the secret U.S.-Israel accord as part of the defense in his trial on conspiracy charges. The Reagan-Bush administration refused to produce the document, and the conspiracy charge was dropped. Nir died 2 months before the start of Oliver North's trial. The truth of the final entry in Michael Ledine's book, Perilous Statecraft, may have something to do with his timely death. Quote,
Insofar as anyone may have had something dramatically new to add to our knowledge of Iran-Contra, it is likely to be Amiram Nir. Dead. Cyrus Hashemi died in London on July 21st, 1986, 2 days after being diagnosed as having a rare, virulent form of fast-acting cancer. Died 2 days after his diagnosis. According to Iranian-American arms dealer Hoshaglavi, with whom he worked on a major Iran arms-related sting operation in the 1985 and early 86, Hashemi was assassinated by U.S. government agents. According to self-proclaimed CIA pilot Richard Brennicky, Hashemi had been a participant in the October 20, 1980 Paris meeting with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, Iran arms dealer Houshang Lavi, Iranian officials, and agents of French intelligence to work out the original arms for hostage delay deal with Iran. Before his death, Hashemi was reported to have said that his 1981-82 U.S. arms sales to Iran had been necessary to obtain the release of the 52 U.S. hostages, released moments after Reagan's inauguration in 1981, and had been approved by the CIA, which Casey headed. Hashemi was also the instigator of the arms for hostages proposal, which resulted in the August 1985 TOW missile shipment to Iran. Dead, the Ayatollah Mohammad Beheshti, who reportedly sent a personal representative, according to one source, Jalal al-Din Farsi, to the pre-election Paris meeting of October 19, 1980, with 1980 Reagan-Bush campaign manager Bill Casey, and according to some reports, also with George Herbert Walker Bush. Beheshti died in a bomb explosion at Islamic Republican Party headquarters in Iran on June 28, 1981. Dead, William Buckley, CIA station chief in Beirut, and it continues. It's October Surprise by Barbara Honegger. Weeks, he had changed his taxes on the wealthy, the banking, the regulations of the insurance and pharmaceutical industry. The book, Unequal
Protection. This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. We posted a poll on our website yesterday. Oh, I'm sorry, this was the YouTube community post. We posted a poll over there. Roy Moore filed a lawsuit to block Alabama Senate result. Was he right to do that, was our question. The answers broke out like this. 7% said yes, if there was fraud, it must be uncovered. 17% said no, the result was declared 2 weeks ago and should stand. 8% said no, Moore is a sore loser. 8% said I don't give a flying Chad, as 529 votes. But those percentages don't add up to 100%. I'm not sure what I'm missing here. Here are some of the selected comments. Julius Yu said, I don't believe him for a second. The fake news trick worked once, and now he needs to retire it. Shara said, there's no indication of election fraud. It's just a waste of tax dollars. Marciano said, he should. There's definitely foul play in swinging the election away from him. Blatant attack on his character, orchestrated to undermine his publicity. John Frank says, no, he's just a sore loser. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that this is the third election that Roy Moore has lost where he has refused to acknowledge that he lost the election. One was in, as I recall, 2006, and another in, as I recall, around 2008. And when he lost those elections, he said, fraud. His fraud now is too many black people voted, right? And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what we expected to hear from you, Roy Moore. So anyway, Science Daily has a fascinating article, the December 27th edition. This is from Hokkaido University. The headline in the Science Daily article is punishment as effective as we think? And there's a subset to this, a sub-question. It's not just like punishment to restrain people's behavior, but rather they say punishment might not be an effective means to get members of society to cooperate for the common good, according to a social dilemma experiment. And what they did was they played the prisoner's dilemma game that was developed, I believe, by the Rand Institute back in the 50s, where you have a choice of cooperating with somebody or not, but you are also competing with a group of people, including that person that you could cooperate with, to end up with more goodies. And it's a good way of determining people's strategies around whether they're willing to cooperate or whether they always want to compete. And so what they did was they built into the game a punishment for not cooperating. Now, you would think that that would cause people to cooperate more, but it actually caused them to cooperate less. It turns out that the reason why that it caused people to cooperate less is that people felt that they were being punished. And punishment can have a demoralizing effect, and also they also interpreted the punishment for not collaborating as when the implied, well, this is a quote from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences where this was first published. While the implied message when punishing someone is, I want you to be cooperative, the immediate effect is more consistent with the message, I want to hurt you. While the researchers in their study published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and punishment is demoralizing. So punishment actually reduced cooperation. Well, this raises a whole bunch of interesting policy questions. For example, we punish people. Now, I realize the Trump tax bill just did away with this, but we punish people with a tax penalty if they don't buy Obamacare, if they don't buy health insurance, or any kind of health insurance, not necessarily the ACA health insurance. Might there be a better way to regulate that behavior or to encourage that behavior? Number one. Number two, welfare recipients. Increasingly, from state to state, we are drug testing people who are applying for food stamps. We're drug testing people who are applying for Social Security disability. We're drug testing people who are applying for long-term unemployment insurance. There's all these, I mean, it's just a matter of time before you have to get drug tested to rent an apartment. I mean, or buy a house or something. And that is a punishment that's supposed to encourage good behavior. What if it's producing the exact opposite result? There's basically two ways to motivate people. It's been a while since we've talked about this, but I think it's really important for everybody to understand. This is NLP 101. I write about this in my book, Cracking the Code. There are two basic motivation strategies that people employ. We internalize these, we externalize these, we find them in our child rearing habits, we find them in our schools, we find them in our workplace, all over the place. There's basically two habits, two motivation strategies that people use. You, at all moments, at every moment, right this second, you are either moving toward pleasure or moving away from pain. Those are the two things that we use to motivate us. Now, sometimes it's internal. We say to ourselves as we're stopped at the red light, I better not run this red light because if I do, that cop behind me will pull me over. Okay, that's moving away from pain. Or when the light turns green, we may say, I'm going to accelerate slowly because it'll save me gas. That's moving toward pleasure. I'm going to save a little money. So these are the two motivation strategies, and we build these into all sorts of things. And in other countries, for example, the criminal justice system. In Norway, there's no such thing as life in prison. There's no death penalty. The maximum sentence is 20 years. And even Anders Breivik, who murdered 73 kids, slaughtered them, the Nazi, is serving a 20-year sentence in Norwegian prisons. Now, his sentence can be renewed at the end of 20 years if they determine that he's still a threat to society. But the clear mandate of the Norwegian criminal justice system, and the best source for information on this is to watch Michael Moore's movie, Where to Invade Next, which I'm pretty sure is over on Amazon. It might even be on Hulu or Netflix. But he actually goes to Norway, visits the prisons, talks to the people, and the prisons don't look like our prisons. The prisons look like a group home. I mean, everybody has a private bedroom. Everybody has, their own space. They have a shared space, living room, kitchen, knives and forks. I mean, it's like getting ready to reintegrate into society. That was the whole point. So in Norway, going to jail is not perceived as punishment, but rather as education, as a way of learning how to function, how to be a good Norwegian citizen.
and being prepared to return to civilization. But here we say, oh, you know, if you get any benefit at all from the government, we're going to punish you. We're going to make you, you know, we're going to humiliate you. We're going to make you go pee in a cup. And if your pee doesn't turn out perfect, you're not going to get the benefit. This whole idea of punishment, and in business, you know, catching people doing things wrong is the principal way that most people manage in business. Catching people doing things right is much more effective. It's harder to do. It requires some effort. It requires some thought. I myself, I mean, you know, it's the way that we were all raised, right? As little kids, what's the parents' #1 mandate? Keep your kids safe, which means when they run out into the street, you say, no. When they put their hand on the stove, no, right? And so as parents, early on, we're moving away from pain, right? Avoiding pain. We're helping our kids avoid pain. And we all internalize that. And so our instinct is to be punitive when really what we need is to be supportive. And as a society, I'd say since the Reagan Revolution, we have been heavily focused on punishment, whereas prior to the Reagan Revolution, we were heavily focused on building a community that works for everybody. It was the essence of the American dream. So, interesting stuff on punishment. This is, as I said, from the December 27 issue of Science Daily. This was first published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. We'll be back. I'm going to tell you about Republican Jesus, and we'll take your calls right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of the news of the day, Republican Jesus, and your calls right after this. Welcome back. Let's see here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Dr. Tom. As usual, you catch me doing something, pouring coffee.
Well, it's from being a waiter, right? They teach you that trick. As soon as somebody puts food in their mouth, ask them a question. So.
Okay. In The Guardian today, there is an article written by an Australian. Her name is Tegan, T-E-G-A-N, Bennett Daylight. I highly recommend that you read this article. And she is a teacher, and she's talking about how hard it is to get people not only to read more than 200 words at a time, but to be able to understand what the author wants.
What's the title of the article?
The difficulty is the point.
Okay. I'm not seeing it on the homepage of Guardian, so I'll look for it after we get off the phone. But anyhow, tell me about it.
Well, she's talking about how education has become more of a business than it is to teach people to think and read and understand.
Right. That's the financialization that I was ranting about, Norma, is that the first goal of education should be to educate, not to make money. The first goal of communication should be to communicate, not to make money. The first goal of transportation should be to, et cetera. Back to you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. But it made me think of my English lit teacher. And after I finished his course, I essentially had to go back and reread everything I've ever read in my life. He used Lawrence Stern's, which most people have never heard of, and his sentimental journey to Eliza, his letters to Eliza. And in it he talked about idle travelers and splenic travelers, the delinquent and felonious travelers. And I got to thinking about comparing this with what we see on fake news and perception management, and how they spoon-feed people and how they feed them sugary words to make them happy. And as people become addicted to sugar, as in coffee, they become addicted to being happy with their fake news. And I'm wondering, do you even remember where the perception management unit was started in New Jersey by the Army in the 50s?
That was...
Fort something.
Yeah, I don't. I'm sorry.
And then it became a private organization, and it moved into media. And I think this
Didn't the Rand Corporation come out of that?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And because I can't remember the name of the fort.
Yeah, have you seen any of the Adam Curtis documentaries on that?
Not for a very long time.
Power of Nightmares, and there's another one, yeah.
But all of this stuff, but this article, I think, The Difficulty is the Point, in The Guardian by Tegan Bennett Daylight, is something people should read. And maybe they can understand why we have such a hard time talking to people and waking them up as to what is happening in our government. And then if you look at this felonious traveler that we have in the White House, can people put this together and think about these puzzle pieces that has become our life?
Is felonious traveler a play on fellow traveler?
No, this is a thief. Have you read Lawrence Stern's?
I've not. No, I'm sorry.
Okay, Lawrence Stern, Seminole Journey, A Journey to Eliza. This is, to me, an important book, and it's very seldom mentioned in schools because the object is to teach you to think. And
we can't have that.
Yeah. Put it with Fahrenheit 451, the original black and white movie.
Okay. I'll check it out. Norma, thank you for the call. Thanks for the information.
Okay.
Always nice to hear from you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Linda in Deerfield Beach, Florida, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Linda, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to wish you and Louise and everyone on your show a very happy New Year.
Well, thank you. The same to you, Linda.
Thank you for keeping us so informed.
I'm doing my best. What's on your mind today?
Hard work. My question to you is, and maybe you can explain this because I have a friend that occasionally listens to you. She's from Michigan. She is on SSI. Her son, she said something about soon to go on SSI. And I tried to explain to her what pay-as-you-go means because she tells me I keep listening to fake news.
Right.
And I said, we'll make her name up as Sandy. And I said, Sandy, you don't understand. Pay-as-you-go is an automatic thing that was waived for 1 year.
Right.
And I don't know if a lot of your listeners even know what that is. Some might not.
Probably not, because I didn't realize until yesterday that it was only a 1 year waiver, or that there even was a 1 year waiver. I didn't realize that they had snuck that or stuck that into the bill. For people who don't know what we're talking about, Linda, here's the deal. This was during the Obama administration, as I recall.
Right, 2010.
It was the year of the sequestration, and as I recall, and the Republicans were saying, you Democrats want to spend too much money, and the Democrats are saying you Republicans want to cut too many taxes, and so the compromise, for lack of a better word, was all legislation going forward has to be paid for, essentially. If you're going to appropriate $100 million to give to people to solve the problem of X, then you have to raise taxes by $100 million, or you have to take $100 million cut from spending in another place. Well, the Republicans will never go along with raising taxes, so that means basically cutting other programs. So this giant load of taxes that are going on the national debt, that has to be compensated for. All but $1.5 trillion of it has to be compensated for in some way, and that means invoking these automatic cuts from pay-as-you-go, and also known as sequestration. And my understanding is that means that there will be an automatic 4% cut in Medicare, but that for the first year, for this year, this coming year, 2018, the election year by coincidence, that 4% cut has been put in abeyance for 1 year. But it's going to kick in 2019 unless Congress does something else. Is my understanding of that consistent with yours, Linda?
Yes, very. And that's why I wanted you to explain it, because I know she's listening. Because I said, please listen to Thom Hartmann for a week or so, because if I can get on there, he can explain it a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
She said she got a raise. She got notice from Medicaid that she's getting a raise. And I says, Sandy, that's something that was put in place way before Trump and the budget and all that stuff. I said, but eventually you're going to get another notice because you're on Medicaid. They're taking $1 trillion out of that. I tried to tell her. I says, and eventually they're going to bankrupt it.
Yep. Yeah. This bill took $1 trillion out of Medicaid or will, and
yeah, I mean, there's just an amazing, a breathtaking failure on the part of our media to explain to people what actually was in this tax bill. It's absolutely breathtaking. Linda,
well,
thank
Tom,
you for the
gotta
call.
Remember something too.
What's that?
Even our media wasn't allowed to see anything. It's 1,000 pages, and nobody knows what's in there.
That's true. That's true. We're just now finding out, literally.
Yeah.
Linda,
Have
thank
a nice
you.
New Year.
Thanks. Hey, Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for the call. Stanley in Tyler, Texas. Hey, Stanley, what's on your mind today?
Tom, it's a pleasure to speak to you again. I've been taking kind of a hiatus from talking to you because I wondered about your support of.
Stanley, if you're listening to the radio or something, you need to turn it off right now and just talk to me on the telephone, or else I'm going to move on to the next caller.
Radio. Hang on just a second.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second.
Okay. Stanley, I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll come back to you. Jim in Los Angeles. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Tom, my friend, Professor Hartmann, you are the smartest man in all of media, and Happy New Year. And I mainly am talking to all your listeners and anyone out there registered independent. Please change and vote Democrat. We are a two-party system. You have to register as a Democrat, mainly because of voter suppression and how votes are counted. And all of the millennials, like I said, the last off-year election, 14% of millennials voted. Bernie woke them up.
Yeah.
But they still believe in, in Jill Stein and the independent. They don't get it. And I do believe we can win back the House and the Senate this election, and then in the next election, win back the majority, win back 60 seats in the Senate and the presidency. I don't think Trump's going to make it through this. I think he's, his son and his son-in-law, are already guilty of collusion. And I don't think Donald Trump knows the meaning of the word collusion. Do you?
Well, in a strictly legal sense, I'm not sure any of us do. In a moral sense, I think everybody gets it. But exactly what, where the lines are drawn about what's legal and what's not legal for a presidential campaign to do, I suspect no matter what happens, it's going to end up before the Supreme Court, which is going to be real interesting. But we'll see. We'll see.
Anyhow, collusion is not the crime, but obstruction of justice, is.
Yeah.
And, Watergate took 2 years, and here's everyone calling for this investigation to end. No,
well, and the Clinton investigations took 6 years. I mean, they investigated Clinton for 6, maybe 7 years until they finally nailed him with Monica Lewinsky, and they didn't even start there. I mean, you had the Rose Law Firm, you had the Travelgate, you had, the Christmas card scandal. I mean, all these so-called scandals that the Republicans drummed up. Jim, thanks for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
For the news of the day and Republican Jesus right after this.
The Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from League of the Iroquois by Lewis Henry Morgan. This was first published in 1851, the same decade that Charles Darwin published Origin of Species. This was a big deal at the time. And when there were still, Iroquois to be talked with and whatnot. So this is, living the way that they were living. So this is from page 89, Structure of the League. This is just basically how the Iroquois Confederacy was put together in kind of an anthropological perspective. In connection with the power of the tribes to designate the sachems, those are the
wise elders. Should be noticed the equal power of deposition. If by misconduct a Sachem lost the confidence and respect of his tribe and became unworthy of authority, a tribal council at once deposed him. And having selected a successor, summoned a council of the league to perform the ceremony of his investiture. Still further to illustrate the characteristics of the tribes of the Iroquois, some reference to their mode of bestowing names would not be inapt. Soon after the birth of an infant, the near relatives of the same tribe select a name. At the first subsequent council of the nation, the birth and name are publicly announced, together with the name and tribe of the father and the name and tribe of the mother. In each nation, the proper names were so strongly marked by a tribal peculiarity that the tribe of the individual could usually be determined from the name alone. Making as they did a part of their language, they were all significant. When an individual was raised up as a Sachem, his original name was laid aside, and that of the Sachemships was itself assumed. In like manner, at the raising up of a chief, the council of the nation, which performed the ceremony, took away the former name of the incipient chief and assigned him a new one, perhaps like Napoleon's titles, commemorative of the event which led to its bestowment. Thus, when the celebrated Red Jacket was elevated by election to the dignity of a chief, its original name, O Titai Nani I, always ready, was taken from him, and in his place was bestowed Sagoye Wat Ha, keeper awake, in allusion to the powers of his eloquence. Each tribe in the nation thus formed a species of separate community. The members of all were all of consanguinity, and all their relationships are easily traced. In like manner, those of the same tribe in each of the other nations were their consanguinee, and their relationships, near and remote, were also traceable. As two tribes were necessarily joined in each family, there was a perfect diffusion of tribes throughout the nation and throughout the league. So whenever somebody got married, they had to marry somebody from a different tribe. It's remarkable. In this manner, the race of the Iroquois, although consisting of different nations, was blended into one people. The league was in effect established and rested for its stability upon the natural faith of kindred. It now remains to define a tribe of the Haudenosaunee of the Iroquois. From the preceding considerations, it sufficiently appears that it was not, like the Grecian and Roman, a circular group of families. For two tribes were necessarily represented in every family. Neither, like the Jewish, was it constituted of the lineal descendants of a common father, on the contrary, or mother, excuse me. On the contrary, it distinctly involved the idea of descent from a common mother. Nor has it any resemblance to the Scottish clan or the Canton or the Switzer. In the formation of an Iroquois tribe, a portion was taken from many households and bound together by a tribal bond. The wife, her children, and her descendants in the female line would, in perpetuity, be linked to the destinies of her own tribe, while the husband, his brother and sisters, and the descendants of the latter in the female line would, in like manner, be united to another tribe and led by its affiliates, or affinities, excuse me. Herein was a bond of union between the several tribes of the same nation, corresponding in some degree with the cross relationship founded upon consanguinity, which bound together the tribes of the same emblem in the different nations. The Iroquois claimed to have originated the idea of a division of the people into tribes as a means of creating new relationships by which to bind the people more firmly together. It is further asserted by them that they forced or introduced this social organization among the Cherokees, the Chippeways, the Mississaugas, and several other Indian nations with whom in ancient times they were in constant intercourse. The fact that this division of the people of the same nation into tribes does not prevail generally among our Indian races favors the assertion of the Iroquois. On the other hand, the laws of descent, at least of the crown, among the Aztecs, dimly shadows forth the existence of a similar social organization, which may have been reproduced among the Iroquois or preserved through a remote affinity of blood. At all events, it was the life and strength of the Iroquois League. Of the comparative value of these institutions, when contrasted with those of civilized country and of their capability of elevating the race, it is not necessary here to inquire. It was the boast of the Iroquois that the great object of their confederacy was peace, to break up the spirit of perpetual warfare which had wasted the red race from age to age. Such an insight into the true end of all legitimate government by those who constructed this tribal league excites as great surprise as admiration. It is the highest and noblest aspect in which human institutions can be viewed, and the thought itself, universal peace among Indian races, possible of attainment, was a ray of intellect from no ordinary mind. To consummate such a purpose, the Iroquois nation were to be concentrated into one political fraternity, in a manner effectively to prevent offshoots and secessions.
By its natural growth, this fraternity would accumulate sufficient power, and then they go on by affiliation to merge everything into one common family. A remarkable book written in 1851, League of the Iroquois, Lewis Henry Morgan.
All about the Thom Hartmann podcast at thomhartmann.com/podcast. They're commercial free, and you can listen anytime, any place you want. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Republican Jesus, this was something that was tweeted to me yesterday. And my apologies for not recalling the tweeter. But I printed out the graphic. It's one of those, it's from RDT Daily. It's one of those graphics that websites produce that just, you know, that people pop up on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. They go viral on the internet. And it's titled Republican Jesus. And you'll recall, you know, I talked many times on this program about Matthew, what is it, 21, as I recall? 25, Matthew 25. Thank you, Nate. You know, I was thirsty and you fed me, I was hungry, and et cetera. So here it is. This is Republican Jesus. I was thirsty, so you allowed corporations to pollute my water. I was vulnerable, so you made it legal for banksters to exploit me. I was a prisoner, so you denied me human rights and tortured me. I was disabled, so you allowed Wall Street to raid my Social Security. I was hungry, so you reviled me and called me a taker. I was old and tired, so you raised my retirement age. I was sick, so you repealed my health insurance. I was a stranger, so you deported me and built a wall. Who would Jesus cut off the health insurance to? Who would Jesus put in prison? Who, you know, it's like, these are not questions that Republicans are asking. Stanley in Tyler, Texas. Hey, Stanley, what's on your mind today?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Stanley, you're on the air. What's up?
Okay. I was wondering, do you really think that we're going to anything in the legislature or our national legislature, Senate, presidency, have you ever heard of power giving up control once it has it?
Yeah, there's that old cliche, power once given is never given back without a fight, or words to that effect. And I think that you know, history shows that's largely true. So certainly the history of the last half of the 20th century showed the increasing accumulation of power in the executive branch, and you know, which Trump is now using. Is there a question behind the question, Stanley? I you know, in the abstract, I agree with you. Once people have power, it's very hard to take it away from them.
Okay, so
and they rarely give it up.
So, do you really see any possibility of the people in power giving it back to the people in the United States, the people who are supposed to have the government?
I'm not so concerned about
in any time that is attainable by, say, this next generation.
Yeah.
Because there is so much money involved, and there's so much power in the media that you know, you've talked about it, and we've talked about it, about how that controls what people do. And then there is what happened with Bernie. Bernie could have won.
Yeah, but that's you know, Stanley, I'm not going to relitigate that, but
I understand.
But your question before that, what was the comment that you made? What was the question before that?
Do you think that we're really going to, that there's any possibility of us getting power back from?
Oh, I remember now. Yeah, I got it. Stanley, thank you for the call. Let me just riff about this on the air here instead of just on the phone. I'm not so concerned about our elected officials. I get it that there's a bunch of craven sellouts, particularly in the Republican Party, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell at the top of that list, who will do basically anything for any billionaire who dangles some money in front of them, and have been doing that for some time. But I don't see them as the problem. I see them as the symptoms of the problem The thing that concerns me is not politicians who are willing to take money from billionaires to do their bidding, but a system which was set up by the Supreme Court, not by we the people, not by the legislatures of the United States as the Constitution requires, but was literally established by the Supreme Court in a series of rulings from 1886 Santa Clara County to 1976 Buckley versus Vallejo to 2010 Citizens United and then 2013 McCutcheon. A series of Supreme Court decisions where the Supreme Court actually made law and said it's okay for rich people to own politicians. And once that happened, and that's only happened in the last 40 years, basically. I mean, this is the cancer stage of Reaganomics. Once that happened, democracy, small d democracy in the United States of America was immediately at risk and continues to be. Our republic is increasingly not a republic, but rather a kleptocracy. It is being run by people who are trying to get everything they can. You know, the majority of the Senate are millionaires. For the first time in the history of the United States, more than half the House of Representatives are millionaires, and they all just voted to give themselves a huge tax cut. But really, they were doing this in large part on behalf of the billionaires, of their donors, of their patrons, and that's what concerns me. Alan in Cumming, Georgia. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Love your show and books. Read several of your books. I just would like to see a show on how bills get written on a federal level at the nuts and bolts level. I've learned a lot about ALEC just by reading the various sites that follow what they do, and we know about the boilerplate that is generated by lobbyists and gets into bills on the state level, but I don't know as much about, really not very much about this on the federal level. Just wanted to get your input on that.
Yeah, I haven't seen any numbers recently because I think it would be very, very difficult to compile, but Public Citizen and Ralph Nader used to talk about this a lot, that the vast majority of federal legislation, and now increasingly because of ALEC, the vast majority of state legislation, of consequence. I'm not talking about bills to name post offices, but actual bills that have, you know, real life impact on all of us, are not written by legislators. They're written by lobbyists. So
yeah,
that's the state of the art, and it's a follow on to the rant that I just did about, you know, money in politics. They are lobbyists for the billionaire class and the multimillionaire corporations essentially. So
yeah. Yeah, we saw in the tax bill recently where it had gotten marked up and just sent to lobbyists, and somehow the media got hold of some of the pages. Remember that?
Yep.
And I guess that's the kind of thing I'd like to see uncovered with more of a sunshine law.
Well, and this is the kind of thing that you would think that programs like 60 Minutes, you know, or NPR with a little investigative reporting would want to tell people about, but it seems that they don't. They have no interest in it, which is a real tragedy. Alan, thanks for the call. Excellent point. Malcolm in Park Forest, Illinois. Hey, Malcolm, what's on your mind today? Happy New Year.
I'd just like to say, I usually listen to you and Norm at Goldman when I listen to the station. Why? Because I learn something every time I listen to either one of you all. I get an education.
Well, thank you.
And sometimes I'm even reminded of something I have forgotten about politically. And so this is something we need to expand because the American public, the American voter, is very seriously not educated politically about what's really going on. So we need some sort of national organization or council or committee of citizens who want to get together. It could be bipartisan, you know, whatever, and start educating the public about voting, what the legislature is doing, you know, and how we're being undermined with citizens. You make people really understand what's at stake, and especially in the red areas. Democrats need to do a better job of getting our message out into the red states to counteract some of the outrageous lies and deceptions put up by these right-wing conservative fascists, I call them, you know?
Yeah, well, the biggest problem we have in the red states, Malcolm, is that there are no progressive radio stations in most red states. None.
Yeah.
Zero.
Well, that's something we need to try to remedy. Maybe
right, and you've got right-wing television networks.
Something to try to build 2 or 3 more stations. You know, WCPT is a treasure, and I
absolutely
about
is.
The station all the time. You know.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Have all kinds of assaults from the right that the public doesn't even know about. You know.
Yeah.
I imagine they give you guys hell. You know. And so this is a treasure that we need to hold on to and expand and have more people like this station, more people like you and Norman Goldman, because I say you two because I really learned from you two. Some of the other people, you know, I don't know that much about. I can kind of take it or leave it. But I want to be educated and reminded of who and what I am as an American citizen, and be assured that there are other people that think and feel like I do that are patriots, that are concerned about the future of America as a sovereign nation, and to do everything we can to ensure the future of this nation. This Trump thing is like a B sci-fi horror movie come true. You know, where the aliens come down and take over the minds of the leaders, destroy theirs. You know,
the pod people.
Reminds me of. He's like a walking, talking comic book cartoon horror figure, and so the only way we're going to counteract that is with the truth. So we need to attack the red states the same way they attack the blue states, but do it with the truth, with verifiable, documentable truth. And some of them will never believe the truth, but even if you get 25%, that's a big percentage voting-wise, you know, politically. So I think there's really a need for this. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think that as long as Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News and orders it to be programmed in a way that causes average working people to vote for the interests of the billionaire class, the Murdoch class, it's going to be damn hard. I think that Fox News is the biggest challenge to...
Well, you know what? America is darn good at doing things that are darn hard.
You're right. You're right, Malcolm. I have not given up. I'm actually an optimist, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us here, and I see progressivism on the ascendancy and the Democratic Party growing, but we have a hell of a job ahead of us. Malcolm, thank you for the call. It's always nice to hear from you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
15 minutes before the hour, back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Steve, watching Free Speech TV in New Boston, Michigan. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Third-time caller, first-time donator.
Thank you.
And happy to do it. And my question today is, I was injured back in 1999 at work, and I was made disabled in 2000. And I've been getting Social Security disability, and I'd had workers' compensation until so many denials came through that I settled my claim with the insurance company. But I'm hearing these things that now our president and our Speaker of the House, Mitch McConnell, are all out to get rid of Social Security disability. So I was just wondering, in your opinion, when and if they are able to do this, are the Republicans also going to allow people like me to file a lawsuit against the corporation in which I was injured so I can continue to live too?
No, they've actually put limits on that. For example, the so-called tort reform down in Texas says that no matter what a corporation, or a doctor for that matter, does to you, the most you can sue for is $250,000.
But in the state of Michigan, where I live, you can't sue your employer if you're injured no matter what, because we have Social Security disability and we have workers' compensation insurance.
Right.
So if they take this away from me, how do I live?
That's a damn good question. I don't know the answer, Steve. I'm not sure that Republicans give a rat's ass. I don't think they care.
Yeah, I already knew the answer. That's the answer. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. And I would urge, like your other callers have called in, Democrats, get out there and vote.
Yep.
Get out and vote. Get out and vote, and donate to Free Speech TV, because you're like the last vestige we have of spreading the truth and making people educated of what's going on.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. And thanks for the call. Jeff in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Thanks for all you do, and best wishes in 2018.
Thanks. Back at you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to reference two recent essays, one from you on Alternet a couple weeks ago and one from Chris Hedges back in October on truthdig.com. And that one was titled, Only Nonviolent Resistance Will Destroy the Corporate State.
Mm-hmm.
Both pieces are concerned with the rise of fascism here in current-day America, and both draw parallels between the so-called Trump administration and the Nazis. After I give my takeaway, Tom, I'd like to hear you riff on this, about how Hedges and George Lakey recall that the economic conditions in 1930s Norway and Sweden were actually worse than in Germany. But rather than only resorting to street fighting the Nazis as they did in Germany, the Norwegians and Swedes stayed focused on ousting the oligarchs, getting rid of the economic elites by presenting an alternative economic vision that is now referred to as the Nordic model.
Right.
And in my mind, Tom, not only is this the way for us to fight fascism here in Orange Chump America, it's the way to win elections in 2018 and beyond. As we saw in 2016, Democrats don't win by simply pointing out the negatives in heinous Republicans. We win by putting up strong candidates who stand strong for something like Doug Jones. It's about motivating people to turn out, as the black voters did in Alabama for Jones. So, Tom, it'd be great to hear you elaborate on the resistance in 1930s Scandinavia and how we can apply that today. And I really recommend the new film Darkest Hour if you haven't seen it yet.
This is the Churchill film?
Yeah.
Yeah, Louise and I are going to go see that this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. Jeff, I'm sorry to say that I'm not all that knowledgeable about the resistance movement in the 30s in Scandinavia, but you've piqued my interest. So maybe this weekend, if I can remember to do it, I will track down some information on that, and we can riff on it next week. Jeff, thanks a lot for the call. It's like I said, it's a privilege having the smartest listeners on radio. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Karen in Farmington, Michigan. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind today? Karen? No, Karen. Let's try Vincent in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Vincent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, you're on the air. What's up?
Well, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need.
That's Karl Marx 101.
Karl Marx.
Yeah.
So I was raised in progressive New York and then moved to L.A. with my folks when I was a kid. I've lived in conservative areas ever since then.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to talk about. I'd like to talk about the response to all the people that I've met in conservative areas, my friends there, that like to say that we need to make America great. First, you have to define what is greatness in our country. The greatness is not the greatness that came from military victories. It's the children that worked in factories before the turn of the century, the people who fought to get them rights as far as working labor laws, and then the New Deal. What I see happening right now is the environment and nature is telling us how we're going to apply to each their need. The need is going to conform capitalism, or else we're all going to die. The need has got to be creating jobs that fulfill people's needs and lets their abilities come out,
yeah.
Like environmental issues, cleaning up the earth. We've got to move from political fighting and define what's going to keep us going into the next century, or what's going to stop us from going there.
Yeah, those are great goals, Vincent, and I share them. And we do need to define positive messages, and I think there's no shortage of them out there, and there's an enormous amount of opportunity here. We just need to get the message out as widely as possible. Vincent, thank you. Very well said. Lars in Kent, Washington. Hey, Lars, what's up?
Hey, Tom, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you for everything you do. Good having somebody who's intelligent, rational on the air. Don't always agree with you 100%, but most of the stuff is pretty good. I had a couple of points I want to touch base on. One was the cabinet, and I'll return to that. But the first point was gerrymandering. It's like, you notice that the Republicans have had such a solid lockdown in the Southeast forever with all the gerrymandering. In addition, look at the stuff that goes on in the reservations. Now with the stuff with the change of the net neutrality, God knows what that's going to mean toward what we're going to get over the net waves, the airwaves. As you pointed out, there's not many free speech stations like there used to be, or as much media. The same thing with the news. So that was one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I find you an optimist, and I could use some of your optimism of how we're ever going to break that gridlock.
Well, the gerrymandering. Let me just speak to that then, Lars, and you know, and thank you for bringing it up. I'm just going to riff on this for a second. Back in 2008, as I recall, in fact, I think it was right after the election of Barack Obama, there was a really good in-depth piece done on this in one of the magazines that tends to carry that kind of thing, The Atlantic, or, you know, one of those kind of publications. And there was a young guy in his 30s who was a statistician or a mathematician or something like that, and he came up with this idea that he pitched to the Republican Party, that if we can just get this number of elected officials in the House and Senate of each of these number of states, then 2010 is a census year. 2010 and 2011 are the years when we're going to redraw the congressional districts, but that redrawing is done by the legislatures and the governors of the individual states. And so just for this election of 2010, we need to seize control of as many state legislatures and governorships as possible so that we can gerrymander those states so that they will be, which will create a permanent Republican majority in the House of Representatives at a federal level. Excuse me. They did this. They were successful at doing this. And they redrew they gerrymandered a whole bunch of states. I forget the number now. It was pretty substantial. And the result of that is that you've got states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, where the majority of the people vote for Democrats, but the majority of the elected officials who go to Washington, D.C. are Republicans. And you know, Republicans end up controlling large, you know, the state apparatus and whatnot because of the gerrymandering. California dealt with this by a citizen initiative. The legislature couldn't get the courage together, but a bunch of citizens did, and people across the state voted for it, where they created a non-partisan commission, not even bipartisan, non-partisan commission that would draw congressional districts based on just largely mathematical criteria, which is really how it should be. Several other states are looking at that. That's the direction we need to go, and it's probably going to have to be driven from the bottom up by the individual people themselves. So I don't see any other way around that. Mike in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Mike, we've got about a minute to the break. What's up? Or to the end of the show, actually.
Hi, Tom. Love what you're doing. Love your show. Listen to you as much as I can.
Thank you.
I tell people, look around you. Look out there. Where is our future? Where's our 300-mile-an-hour train? This is the 21st century.
Right.
Come on.
Our 300-mile-an-hour train is running between Shanghai and Beijing right now.
Very good. And where's our Autobahn? Boy, I'd love to take a Corvette up on an Autobahn and do 200.
Yep.
Come on.
Yep. Those are in China, too.
Ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous how they stole our future.
Who's the they? Who is the they who stole our future, Mike?
Corporations, Republicans.
Yeah. Okay, I can't argue with that. Mike, thanks a lot for the call. It's Warren Buffett just laid this out. He said, yes, there's class warfare in America, and my class is winning. It's very simple. Anyhow, it's been a heck of a week, a heck of a year. It's the last show of 2017. Let's hope for a better year tomorrow, or a better year coming, right? Starting next week. And in the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. I'll see you next year. Have a great weekend.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets. and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.